Tick-tock, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. It's your friendly neighborhood philosopher here. And with me, I've got Jai and Daughter of Christ. For some reason, every time I go live with them, it puts them on mute as soon as I go live. I think I just have to... Let's see. I think I just have to click on them, then they're live.
Oh, there we are.
And then... All right, we can hear you now, right?
Cool. Yeah, you can hear us?
Yeah. Hey, how you doing?
Awesome. Yeah, we're doing good. We're always excited to be with you, David, and everyone else. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, hello everyone. Another go around with Farid.
Yeah. Good old Farid, the gift that keeps on giving. And it's not it's funny, I was just thinking the same about like Ali Dawa and Muhammad Hijab. Because every time they go live, it's like you can make 10 live streams out of all the stupid stuff they say. But Farid's also like that, but it's totally, I don't know, it's totally different. Like Ali Dawa and Muhammad Hijab are just saying like idiotic stuff because they basically have the mentalities of children. Whereas Farid, he's just trying to defend the Quran and ends up saying a lot of stupid things. And so it's complete. They're different kinds of gold mines, or I guess if one's a gold mine, one's a silver mine. I don't know. But anyway, we got a bunch of guys giving us a steady supply of awesome content. So you guys have been responding to Farid for a while. So what are your overall thoughts on Farid and his you don't need to go into details because we're going to go through his latest video defending the different kirat. But what are you guys' overall thoughts on Farid as far as his general responses?
Yeah, his general responses. He tries to respond. He tries his best to defend Islam, but he always fails. And like you said, he ends up giving us the opportunity to make a video and showing where his responses fall short, or in some cases where he's actually representing Islam, but it just makes Islam look stupid. So I'm sure we're going to see both of those today with his video. But yeah, Farid, I agree with you. You know, we were just watching a video earlier where apparently it was like Sneeko and Ali Dawa and Muhammad Hijab. They were all together in like this cafe or something. And Muhammad Hijab was saying that Andrew Tate has better qualities of the Jesus of the New Testament. And so he says things like that, and then other Muslims respond and go crazy, and we're planning on doing a stream to respond to that as well. But like you said, they're just gold mines of content to expose Islam. So yeah, I think Farid's kind of like
he's very low level.
Yeah,
he doesn't prepare. He just does things on the fly. Like if you watch some of his responses, he just has the books behind him and says, wait a minute, let me go get the book, let me check this, and opens it. And you think, dude, didn't you not think to do this before the stream so you don't look silly? And then he says, oh, you know what, they're right. Yeah, it does say that.
Powerful.
What do you think?
Powerful stuff. I have to say, AP and I have talked about this a little as well. We've had discussions in the past where we're categorizing the Dawa guys based on whether these are guys we would ordinarily get along with, or if we would never get along with them no matter what they believe. Like we concluded that it wouldn't matter. Like Ali Dawa could become the nicest Christian in the world. We still wouldn't like him, just like personality wise, super annoying. Same thing with Muhammad Hijab and some of the others. It's not because of what they're saying. It's not because of the content of their message. We just would not get along with these guys. We would, personality-wise, we would clash. Whereas we have agreed in the past that Farid seems like someone we would get along with. He seems more chill and laid back, and so with him, it's just he wouldn't. In other words, he wouldn't get along with us because he's a Muslim and we criticize Islam. So if it weren't for that, if he believed something else or didn't have a problem with us criticizing Islam, we'd probably get along. Anyway, should we go ahead and jump into Farid's new video?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say though before that, I think Farid, and I've seen him say this in some of his videos. He expresses a lot of arrogance, and he thinks he's like, he thinks he's like this very knowledgeable, like know-it-all.
He
He's got
ain't
like the
nothing.
yeah, he's got like this know-it-all type of personality. And I had one conversation with him. It was on an app called Clubhouse, and he was trying to deceive the people in the room about the different readings of the Quran and all this stuff. And they let me up on the stage or the platform to talk to him. I had a short conversation with him about it. I think it was like a half hour or something, or maybe it was actually a little longer because it switched to the New Testament sometime after that. But he what he does is he's like kind of on videos. He seems to be like more gentle and things like that. And but when he was like in person, when like or no just on the microphone. I mean, like we were kind of interacting like it's like a phone call or something like that. It's like he's not as confident in his presentation of the facts and the material, and he actually conceded on a bunch of points.
Huh.
So I don't know. Maybe the arrogance is like it's like a thing just for YouTube, and he just
So it's
maybe
an act.
yeah, it could be just be an
Yeah.
act, and then maybe behind this, maybe like in real life, he's like a humble kind of person. I don't know. It's yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I mean that's actually good. And if he's not
Yeah.
actually this arrogant, because I mean he's dialed it down. Like if you go back like 4 years ago, he sounded like the most arrogant person in the
Yeah.
world. Like you dial it up. So you think that you're going to come here, David, and tell me what? Like everything he said. And then anyway, then I didn't pay attention to him for a while. And then I clicked on other videos, like, oh, he doesn't sound exactly like that anymore. So anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is weird stuff. But yeah,
Yeah, like
it is a,
even when he concedes a point, like he was like, okay, you got me. Put it on your calendar, put it on your wall, or something like that. He's like, he's just go very like very weird. It was a really weird
It's
interaction.
salty.
Yeah, he's very salty kind of guy. But yeah,
oh, that's kind of funny.
yeah,
Anyway, so I don't know if he's not responding to me here. He's responding to a question from one of his viewers, but the question that was raised is like something that I said like 2 days earlier in a live stream. So I don't know if it just came up again for that person, or if that person is watching one of our videos and I asked it. So then he ran to Farid to ask the question. But I had, in a recent live stream, I'd raised the question about the different kirat, and I basically said, why don't you just treat them as mistakes? If you when
oh,
you say that they all go back to Muhammad and they're revealed by Allah, then you're attributing all these differences to Allah. You're saying that all this goes back to Allah, and He's the one who put all these differences in these different Qurans and so on. And I said, especially when you end up with contradictions, then you're attributing those contradictions to Allah, and you're saying those are in Allah's eternal Quran somehow. And I said, why don't you just say scribes messed up? Then you're not blaming Allah at all. You're saying human beings screwed up. Why would blaming Allah and saying Allah revealed this contradictory nonsense, why is that a superior idea to you than saying human beings make mistakes when they copy books by hand? Why do you want to have it that way? Why do you want to put the blame on Allah? So anyway, someone, as we'll see at the beginning of this video, someone asked Farid, why don't we just say that the different kirat are due to scribal mistakes and so on? And
right.
he gives a response. Just wanted to put one comment up from Black Angel here. How is it, child graping when there is parental consent? Famous tweet by Farid when people were calling out Muhammad or others for child marriage, and pointing out that little kids are incapable of giving that kind of consent. And then Farid said, how is it grape when there's parental consent? It's like, hey, yeah, some 50-year-old dad says, yeah, you can go do this to my little daughter and so on. And it doesn't matter if she has any clue what's going on. It's fine as long as you got parental consent.
Wow.
Nice, 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 nice stuff. Shout out to who sent these? Shout out to Prono22 for gifting some Roadshow memberships. Actually, we got two super chats. Let's take these real quick, and then we'll jump into the video. Let's see. First live stream I've been able to catch. Love your work. Keep exposing the Dawa lies, brother. I'm wondering if this because we're live earlier for European viewers, as much as I pretend to dislike Europeans. I really love them.
Secretly love them.
Hyperactive says, David, I really appreciate your guests, but I don't think they like juice that much. Watch their video, Apostate Prophet versus Daniel Hakikachu at about minute 33. You'll understand. You guys know what that's all about?
I don't know, but they have it timestamped.
Depends what kind of juice.
Yeah. So I think that was. Oh yeah. So that's that. Oh, by the way, that debate with Daniel and AP, I think that was one of the worst debates that Daniel had. AP just he completely killed them. Yeah. And I think
things dropped off. Things dropped off pretty hard for Daniel over his last several debates.
Yeah, so I think during that debate, what we said was that we're not going to defend the Talmudic statements that Daniel was objecting to, or something to that effect. And we agreed that the Talmud says things that go against the word of God. And so maybe that's what they're referring to. I don't know. But
I don't know why that would be a problem. That's exactly what I think. Guys, just so everyone knows, I don't believe in the Talmud. I think there's all sorts of very problematic claims in the Talmud. However, I think that you should represent books accurately, and so sources, whatever they may be. And so when you see groups like the Groypers saying that this text says this, and you look at it, and all you have to do is read around it, and it's not saying that, or sometimes it's saying the opposite, you got to call it. You got to call it out. You got to call out dishonesty wherever you find it, ladies and gentlemen. So guys, at the end of the day, the Talmud could say everyone should be an axe murderer. That would not mean that we are fine with it. But if someone says the Talmud says everyone should be an axe murderer, then no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. So depending on context, sometimes you might want to respond to stuff. Basically, if you're responding to people who are trying to use something that they're making up or twisting to stir up violence against Jews or something like that, that's a good time to respond to things. But guys, at the end of the day, we don't believe it, so we have no. It's not like criticizing it. You're breaking us up or something like that. No, our feelings are all hurt.
Yeah, so Daniel would he'd take quotations from the Old Testament and he'd mix it with the Talmud. So I was saying we're just going to be responding to the biblical part. We're not here to defend the Talmud. And we don't dislike the Jews. That's not true. We love Jews. We love everyone. We want them all to be saved. In fact, we have a video on the channel where I debated a panel of I think it was 4 or 5 Orthodox Jews, and you can watch for yourself to see, does this guy hate the Jews or does he actually believe that they're lost and he wants them to come to the truth? And you can come to your own conclusions. It's compare it to someone who like you said, David, there's people who use certain information to try to attack the Jews or make them look whatever type of Actually, it's kind of funny because we were just talking about this. I think it was Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens. They recently had this big beef because apparently Candace has been she kind of she took away he's oh, she stole my talking points and didn't deal me in or something like that. And so there's there's beef between the what do you call them, neo-Nazis or whatever like that. She's getting she's stealing his followers or something. So you can compare someone like Candace Owens or Nick Fuentes, how they talk about the Jews, and then watch that video where I had the discussion with the Jews, and you'll see a world of difference there.
And that's it's actually pretty funny watching that, because the Groypers are a group of white nationalists, right? They want a white Christian nation, and then so these are people who I mean, they would obviously be thinking of Candace as a useful idiot. Here's a useful
Yeah,
idiot who can help us against Jews. Ultimately they would think she is not welcome in their country. That like she cannot be in the same country with them, and yet they all they're all willing to buddy it up for if it helps
exactly.
them against Jews. Nice stuff. Nice stuff. Hey, could you do a video reaction of a video called "Scariest Hell Testimony Ever"? It has a green background. There's so many testimonies of hell. There's even studies on NDEs, near-death experiences. Also look up Touching the Afterlife. Yeah, those are... I screenshotted that so I can get that exact video. But yeah, that is one category of near-death experiences. So lots of people have near-death experiences. They're common. They're very common themes that, you see a tunnel and you're going through a tunnel or something like this, and you're going towards a light. Also, seeing your entire life sort of recapped before your eyes, your life flashing before your eyes and so on, like your entire history. Some people say that they can actually zero in, like you're seeing it all, but you can like zero in on certain moments and so on. So anyway, there are common themes, but one of them is actually people who go to a scarier place. And I actually know someone who had one of those. He was,
Really?
yeah. He said it wasn't, he said it wasn't a feeling that I was burning. It was darkness, and that it was so crowded. He said it was
Wow.
just so packed in and so on. But I mean, one also common theme of near death experiences is lots of time they have a really, really significant impact on people when they come out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was Craig Keener or and I think his volume on miracles. I think he documents some, but Gary Habermas definitely does. And yeah, the stories that they tell are like amazing. Like sometimes they're like in the operating room, and then they can tell you like, this isn't like a hell experience, but just like a near death experience. They can tell you like exactly what was going on in like the reception or something like that. Like they can recall
Mhm.
events like perfectly, and they bring them back to life, and they like tell the exact story, or in some cases I think he documented like there was like a tennis ball on the roof of the hospital or something like
Yeah.
that, and they were able to see that, and it just something that you just can't deny it. It's like the information that they come back with.
Yeah, that's also a subset of near-death experiences. They call them veridical. It's one where the person comes out of it and knows something that person
Yeah.
could not have possibly known, just based on like the ones, especially the ones where the person's is brain dead and
Yeah.
ears are closed and so on, and then somehow the person is aware of everything. Anyway, yeah, lots of interesting stuff going on there as far as especially because people think, oh, I have dreams and I kind of invent this world. So why couldn't that be happening? Well, a couple of things. One, some people, their brains are completely shut down and they're still having experiences. But also when you wake up from a dream, you think of the dream as like less real. It's like you wake up to the real world and you're like, oh, that was less real. People have the opposite effect. I mean, it's the opposite effect with a near death experience. They describe it as like hyper reality. Like that's more real. And then when you come back to it, it's like you came to something that's less real. So anyway,
Yeah.
that was wild, wild, wild stuff. Let's see. Thoughts on Andrew Wilson making an argument that Muhammad damaged Aisha, since 9-year-olds have a 2-inch canal, and Muhammad would either have to have a 1.8-inch noodle. Um, yeah, I didn't see what Andrew Wilson said, um, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the measurements biologically, so I wouldn't know how to comment at this point without
Oh,
doing.
yeah, he had a debate with Muslim Lantern, and I hadn't heard of this guy. I was just under the impression that this is just like I thought like it was like a Christian guy who's going into debate, and when I tuned into it, and it was like, okay, that's not what I was expecting at all. And the one question he kept asking was about, yeah, basically about Muhammad, and like if he, you know uh, yeah, it was a really weird discussion. But I'm glad that afterwards they did a debate between Muslim Lantern and Jay Dyer, and that was much better.
That's what was confusing me, because I saw somewhere that Muslim Lantern was debating Andrew Wilson, and then we went live, and people were saying, hey, Jay Dyer's debating Muslim Lantern. I was going, no, I think that's Andrew Wilson. So I was correcting people, but apparently it was just separate debates.
Yeah, it was a separate debate. Yeah.
And it is hilarious how so many debates now are coming down to sex with children now. These Dawa guys, hey Dawa guys, keep it up, man. You're doing great work, turning your entire religion to one massive defense of sex with little kids. And
Yeah.
last one here, I think it's that you compare it to the Quran and make both teach the same evil. You can say the Talmud just like the Bible, New Testament not perfect, but not to put all on the same level as the Quran.
Uh, not sure.
So it sounds like you were saying that the Quran is just like the Talmud is just like the Quran. Well, I mean, in the sense that we
I don't
don't
remember
believe that.
saying. Yeah, I don't remember saying that.
Um,
But yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean, maybe we said like the Quran takes things from the Talmud. Maybe in some cases,
which it
like
does.
like killing one of the innocents, like killing the whole world, that kind of thing. Maybe that's. Or, I don't know exactly. I have to see the exact video, but I don't remember saying that. But yeah, I just
Yeah, and again, Moo Joe, at the end of the day, I wouldn't care if someone criticized the Talmud or said that the Talmud is filled with false things. It is, and interestingly, an Orthodox Jew would acknowledge that there are false things in the Talmud, because sometimes you have completely contradictory positions in there. So, yeah, not
yeah,
not terribly interesting to me if Christians don't believe in the Talmud. I don't know any Christian who believes in the Talmud. So, um,
yeah,
yeah, what I believe about the Talmud is that it is a record. It's a record of rabbis discussing discussing interpretations on passages and how they need to be understood as time goes on and so on, and so it's true in the sense that it's a true record of these discussions and so on. But yeah, so yeah,
yeah.
I don't know
And
what to do here.
I think we can also use the Talmud for a number of things. Like you might hear an objection to say like, "Oh, this Christian belief is like some pagan, crazy, like Greek idea." And then like, actually, no, no, you can find the same thing in the Talmud. So it's actually a
Yeah,
Jewish idea, and so you can use it to show actually. Like if you think like I don't know like there's a teaching of like a righteous dying for the unrighteous, for example, like that's a Jewish teaching. A lot of people think, oh no, that someone dying for someone else's sins, or their sin, their sins be taking, making atonement for other people, that's like this pagan practice. But no, that's a Jewish practice. It's in the Talmud, and it teaches that the death of the righteous does make atonement. I mean, it depends on the discussion, but we do reference the Talmud for a whole bunch of different things. But I just don't remember saying like they both teach the same evil. Maybe I could think of a context where that would be like maybe justified in like like denying Jesus, maybe, but I just don't remember saying it. Yeah,
yeah, and I mean, no, I mean, there's also some messed up things. It's that my other problem. So one is when people just completely misrepresent it, and so what you'll have there is sometimes you'll say Rabbi so and so said this, and then Rabbi so and so responded to him and said, "You're wrong. It should be like this."
right,
And the groups like the Groypers and so on will take what Rabbi so and so said and say, "See, this is what Jews believe," and they'll make it this
exactly,
blanket statement when your average Jew's never even heard that before. They've never heard that. They've never read it. They've never heard it. So one, you're applying it to all Jews when they aren't familiar with it, and two, you ignore that there's the opposite. There's the opposite teaching from some other rabbi, and so the point is, Groypers and Muslims, they treat it like it's the Quran, in the sense that it's just a collection of commands from God, and therefore anything you find in it is a command from God, and therefore, like something in the Quran, a Muslim would be required to believe in that thing that the Quran says. Therefore, a Jew would be required to believe in everything in the Talmud. You can't believe in everything in the Talmud because, again, you've got debates among rabbis, and they're saying the opposite thing sometimes. So anyway,
yeah.
um, But yeah, so guys, if anyone out there has actual criticisms of the Talmud, here's where I have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with lying about it, which is what the Groypers and Muslim apologists do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, on Daniel Hakikachu and his stuff, it's I mean, I said it before. I said it before he started having his losses. I've always pointed out that the Dawa guys have sort of short career spans because they come out and each one's got his new way of doing things. He's got his new shtick or something like that, and it works for a while because the Dawa guys look for some new guy who's got some new way of doing things that people aren't prepared for, and so he can score some like debate points and so on. But eventually people catch on to what the method is, and then they destroy it. So Daniel's thing was coming out and citing 27 different scholarly articles that no one's read. No one's read. So when he's saying, and this article says this, and this article says that, no one's in a position to say that's not what the article. You're not familiar with the article. And so you just have to kind of take him at his word. That doesn't work forever. Eventually you run into someone who will actually read all the sources, which is what Inspiring Philosophy did. And it was massively downhill for Daniel after that because he got exposed. He got exposed as, like, apparently he reads the titles and sometimes part of the abstracts of these articles and then makes things up about them.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's actually I have an example of that because he referenced one of these books about like, all these Western scholars believe that the Quran that we have goes back to Muhammad, and he referenced Sean Anthony's book Muhammad and the Empires of Faith. And I scrolled through, I skimmed through the book, and I looked for every time he referenced manuscripts. So I decided to ask him on Twitter because some of these guys, like, Sean Anthony, he's like very active on Twitter. So I just asked him. I said, what's the scholarly consensus or the academic consensus on this topic? And they don't say that the Quran goes back to Muhammad. They say it goes back to Uthman. That's what they say. So and then they acknowledge that other companions had different Qurans. So if you want to get that Quran of Muhammad, there's a lot of, well, did it say, like, the way that Ibn Masud said it, or did it say the way Uthman said it? Like, there's different ways to go about it, but they don't actually say what he was claiming they said. Like you said, he just says at the title of a book or says the title of an article, gives the author name, the scholar, and then just, oh yeah, I said it, so there it is. But you look it up and it's not there. Like I said, I actually asked the guy himself, and he said, no, that's not what we believe. We don't believe it goes back to Muhammad. We don't believe we have manuscripts that go back to Muhammad.
that's good. That's good. Lowther says, hey, David, life is treating me good, and I think God would like me to share it. That's good. Everyone else I hear from is like, everything sucks. So it's good to hear that things are good. Emitai says, as an Israeli Jew, we learned the Torah at school, but I haven't even heard of the Talmud till 18 and never read it. Love from Israel. Keep doing good. And that seems to be fairly common. Like, yeah, again, you have Muslims who think of the Talmud like the Quran in the sense that it's this collection of commands and therefore they can take anything out of it. And that's what Jews in general believe. Just like if it's something in the Quran that Muslims in general are supposed to believe this and so on. And it's just it's not true. Most Jews are not familiar with the contents of the Talmud unless it like has impacted their lives. But even among Jews who are very familiar with the Talmud, they would not interpret it the way like the Groypers and the Muslims are saying they would interpret it as this collection of commands that are binding on everyone.
Yeah. I think it just depends on also like how religious your family is. Like if you grew up in like a more religious Jewish community, they have something called Daf Yomi, which is basically like a daily page of the Talmud or something, and so they're familiar with it. But it just depends. Most of Israel is secular, so they're not like these super religious. Like the black suits and black hats and the peyot
Yeah.
or the those kind of that's
Yeah.
not your average Israeli. And in fact, your average Israeli is against those guys because they think that they're like backwards or something, or they're like making the country like look bad or something like that. You see a lot of fights between the your average Israeli and then like these ultra religious Jews. So when people try to paint them as like, oh, all these Jews are like this or whatever, like that, it's like actually there's a lot of diversity amongst the Jews, and the religious are. I don't know the exact number, but maybe like 20% or something. I don't know. Like it's not a high percentage.
Yeah, no, that's the impression that I got from interacting with Jews. Is again the Groiper message is he'll go through this meme. So Nick Fuentes, he does it in a speech. He goes through this meme of quotations from the Talmud, and then he says, "And if the president of your bank believes that about you," and it's like, wait, so you think like every Jew just has these things memorized and is acting on these, when again, if you go to them, what very frequently that's not what the passage is even saying, or it gives multiple comments, different perspectives of different rabbis and so on. Anyway, just not dealing with the top brass there. Review Andrew Wilson's opening. It puts Muslims in a rock and a hard place. So either Mo was too big and caused damage, or has a tiny little noodle new angel. We'll check it out. Because this sounds funny. Since you left before AP read my super chat here again. How's it going, Joel? And what is this? David ain't no morning wood, nor is he a dry wood. His skin is tough as hardwood. He roasts jihadis like firewood. His knowledge is compressed like plywood. He's looking like flywood, and the movie will be made by Hollywood. I helped you out there. Hey, guys. Is there a mention of Muhammad's father in Islam? Yeah, Abdullah. A guy named Abdullah. Died before Muhammad was born. Possibly long before Muhammad was born. Boom Boom Room idea. Muhammad and Aisha's garments arguing with his own sock puppet, Allah turning Zionist.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, that would be funny. Arguing with his own sock puppet. The Talmud is full of contradictions. Hey, and this super chat is in shekels, so it's authoritative on all matters related to Talmud. The Talmud is full of contradictions and it's very structured deliberately, as rabbis debate each other in even different eras, but they are presented on the same page in regard to a Torah Mishnah passage. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You can't possibly read it the way Muslims and Groypers think that someone is reading it. So one, you have tons and tons of people who aren't familiar with it. And then even the people who are familiar with it, who read it regularly, and so they can't possibly interpret it the way that the Groypers and so on interpret these things. All right, so yeah, we kind of got sidetracked there, ladies and gentlemen, because this is a show about the Quran, a book that is exactly like the Talmud in every single way.
Yeah, Farid's gonna be watching this. He's gonna be like, "Wait, what's the Talmud? Am I gonna respond to the Talmud? What's this?" I think the last stream that we did, he responded. Someone told me it was like a 5-hour response that he did to us. Goodness. Last time So he actually went through the whole thing, and I was like, "Well, God bless you for doing that. I would never ask you to do that. Ask anyone to do that." But he basically said it was like a huge waste of his time. Like he didn't actually really respond to any of the points. It was. So if you respond to this one, it'll probably be another 5-hour stream. I don't know.
Oh boy, Farid. What kind of person sits around making super long live streams? I don't know. What's the world coming to? All right, we ready to jump into this?
Yeah.
All right. And if I recall correctly, I sort of skimmed through this last night, and Farid is drinking a lot of, I don't know what he's drinking, tea, coffee, camel pee, whatever. Who knows what these guys are drinking nowadays. But let's go ahead and check this out. Oh my goodness.
Ahmed E. Muhammad says, why do we not critically think that qira'at are just mistakes? Allah. Folks.
Ahmed. Everyone get that? Yeah, I always forget. There's something called the curse of knowledge, Jai and DOC, and that's where if you're familiar with the topic, you keep talking about it, and other people might not understand what you're talking about.
Oh yeah.
So we like at this point we're talking about kirat and so on, and let's try as much as we can to keep in mind that there are people this might be new for. In other words, they might not have seen previous live streams, but give them the quick rundown of what the different kirat are.
So the normal lying narrative of Muslims has always been the Quran has been preserved letter for letter, word for word, syllable for syllable, vowel sound by vowel sound. But the actual truth is the Quran is in different versions. They are Arabic versions, different ones. They're called qira'at. Qira'at is the plural of qira'a, which means reading. So there are different readings of the Quran. Now, Muslims used to lie about them saying, oh, they're accents or they're just different ways of saying the same word. It's not true. They are different words, different sentences, different meanings, contradictory meanings, and even different rulings to do with practice, Muslim practice.
Like legal.
Like legal practice. So here, Farid is faced with someone who asked the same question that you asked, David. You started something, saying, could it be that they're mistakes?
Yes.
So everyone, you can go to different parts of the world, and if you were to listen to them reciting their Qurans in certain parts of the world, you would hear differences. And Muslims actually believe in different Qurans, and they call them the Qirat. And after decades of Muslim da'is saying what DOC just said, namely dot for dot, letter for letter, then all of a sudden you had all these young Muslims who were confused. What are you talking about? There's different Qurans, and we have different Qirat, and so on. And so right now they're dealing with the aftermath of Muslims. After these Muslims had been programmed to believe that the Quran had been perfectly preserved, dot for dot, letter for letter, and so on, then all of a sudden it came out that there are all these different Qurans, and their faith has been shaken. And so they're trying to figure out what's going on. And then they have people like Farid to explain it to them.
In fact, just as like a way to kind of give a little bit more background on this, I just want to show an example of kind of where these differences might come from. So the history is like really, really crazy of the different readings of the Quran, because Muslims today, they believe in like these 10 readings, but actually the truth of it is that there's 10 readers, and each of those 10 readers has 2 students. And so there's actually 20. Like if you were to, have like physical book versions, you'd have 20 physical books, and they would differ. And like, some places there'd be minor differences, like little changes in pronunciation here or there. Some places you're going to have, like Daughter of Christ said, and, like there's going to be legal contradictions between what's the ruling on this, what's the ruling on that. Well, it depends on which Quran you're reading. Some cases you're going to have added words. Some cases you're going to have missing words, depending on like, your perspective of what you think the original said. Is it an added thing or something taken away? But they didn't start that way. And in fact, when Muhammad's companions were introduced to this issue of different readings, there's like kind of like a buildup, I think, in the Muslim sources, because there's one tradition that says that, for example, like you have 2 companions that come to Muhammad, and they say to him, "Hey, does this chapter of the Quran have 35 verses or 36 verses?" And instead of answering the question, it says his face just turned red. And then Ali just answers, and he says, "You know what? Just read it as you've been taught it." That's what Muhammad's trying to say. I guess he could like read his thoughts or something like that. He didn't actually say anything. His face just turned red. But he didn't actually.
By the way, that would be fun. That would be funny. Muhammad, does this surah have 35 or 36 surahs? Allah revealed it in both ways. Trust me, bro.
Yeah, in fact, I'll put it on the screen, actually. I'll put it on the screen here, and you'll see the hadith, what we're talking about here. So
what happens if I click on that down there? No, that doesn't work. I gotta pop out of here. 1 second.
All right.
And all right, what do you got here?
So here we go.
Yeah, so Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, we differed concerning surah of the Quran, and said it is 35 verses or 36. We went to the Messenger of Allah and found Ali conversing with him. We said, we have differed concerning the recitation. The face of the Messenger of Allah turned red, and Ali said, the Messenger of Allah is telling you to recite it as you were taught.
Yeah. and there's like other variations of this, and other situations where it's like this, and this is I think this might have been before like the ahruf was kind of made up, but I don't know. That's just my thought on it. But so you have like ever since this has been introduced to Muslims, you have like this confusion of, okay, is it 35 verses or 36 verses? And Muhammad he doesn't actually answer the question. His face just turns red. So you can see the confusion that comes from that. And in fact, when you do get to the topic of ahruf, which is something that's inexplainable from the Muslim perspective, they have over 40 opinions as to what ahruf means. It literally means like letters in Arabic. That's what it literally translates to. But what does it actually mean? The Quran was revealed in 7 letters. We know it doesn't actually mean letters there. So what does it mean? Well, Muslims have come up with over 40 interpretations. So whether this is to do with ahruf or not, this is just adding to that whole kind of story of like, what did the early Muslims do when they found differences in their Qurans? Like, Muhammad taught to me like this. Oh, well, he taught to me like this. Well, mine has 35 verses. No, mine has 36. So let's go to him. Let's try to settle it. And they go to him, and his face just turns red.
Hey, why's your face looking like a tomato, Muhammad?
Yeah, what's going on? And then Ali comes in to save the day, and he's like, oh, just recite it the way you were taught. So that didn't actually answer the question. The question was, is it 35 verses or 36 verses? And then Ali's like, well, just read it how you've been taught. But that's not answering their question. They want to know, what does the chapter consist of? Does it consist of 35 or 36? And so, you can see how, they thought that one of them was making a mistake. So the natural kind of the assumption is that, when you see these differences, you think that, there's a mistake. And, I think there's an explanation for that.
Not an accent.
Yeah, not an accent.
It's a number issue,
Yeah.
And this is again, this information had been kept from Muslims for a long time. In Dawah, people have been pointing out. By the way, be a fun little video titled "Everything That Ever Turned Muhammad's Face Red," and then go through all the hadiths where Muhammad's face turns red over something. But anyway, so the passages like that are things where your average Muslim had been taught. Muhammad received these things. They put it all in a book. There were the Muslim community memorized the Quran. Then they put it into a book, and that book has been perfectly preserved for 14 centuries. And every time a scribe has ever sat down to write a copy of the Quran, Allah has miraculously preserved that scribe's hand so that he writes out everything completely perfectly. And there hasn't been one letter. I have Muslim apologetics books saying that there's not been one letters difference between any two Qurans in its entire history, and so on. And so on. So anyway, and it was all complete nonsense. And now Muslims are worried about it. And now that Muslims, so this is a short version, ladies and gentlemen. Now that Muslims have found out that there are all these differences in the Quran, they're asking their da'is, the same guys who lied to them and told them perfect preservation right down to the letter for all these years. They're going to those da'is saying, what are all these differences? And you have some different approaches. As far as explaining differences in different Qurans and so on. And one of the issues that they have to deal with is, again, they use different Qurans in different parts of the world. And what do you do with those? So what you have is, right now you have different Qurans in different parts of the world. And then in early Islam, when it was brought up to Muhammad, hey, Muhammad, people are reciting the Quran differently, then he said, oh, yeah, that's because it was revealed in multiple different ways. And so the question is, what's the relationship between different Qurans that we have today and these different ways that the Quran is supposedly revealed during the time of Muhammad? What's the connection between the two? And it sounds like Farid's perspective is that you have the different Qira'at now because of the different ahruf, and that's what caused the big war with Sheikh Yasser Qadhi, because Sheikh Yasser Qadhi doesn't think that works, and so that makes him the enemy of the Ummah. All right, so wanted everyone to have that little bit of background. That's what Farid is talking about. It gets brought up to Farid, why don't we just say that we have different Qurans because scribes messed up at some point, right? That's how you would normally explain textual variants. But let's see what he says.
Ahmed E. Muhammad says, why do we not critically think that qira'at are just mistakes? Allah.
Yeah, Farid doesn't like that idea, apparently.
Folks. Ahmed E. Muhammad says, why do we not critically
Ahmed E. Muhammad sounds like, I don't know why. It sounds like Wile E. Coyote to me or something.
think that qira'at are just mistakes? I really like this question.
Me too.
And this question is what opponents of Islam need to think about. They don't put
Yeah.
themselves in our shoes. Yeah, they don't put themselves in our shoes. They're looking at these as attacks against the deen. Ahmed Muhammad asked this very good question,
Uh-huh.
and I want to see what you guys have to say. Like, why don't we just consider these things mistakes?
I feel like I have to
Oh, so
drink
he's
every time he
having
takes a sip. What's that?
The audience is he's having the audience answer it.
What's the answer though?
What's
Why
the
is he
answer,
not
Farid?
answering?
Just give us the answer, Farid.
I think he's having his audience answer the question. That's
Because
what
he
he's doing.
doesn't know.
No, I think he just wants to see like what their level of knowledge. So he's got one person in his chat saying, "Why don't we just consider these mistakes?" And by his name, sounds like a Muslim to me. So
Yeah.
he's got Muslims asking him this, and then Farid's responding by saying, "Well, this is what the enemies of Islam or like the infidel is what they think." Well, no, this guy's a Muslim and he's asking this question.
Maybe they're like, okay, guys, put your heads together. What's the answer? Let's come up with something.
I think he's curious to see like his audience's kind of like level of understanding on the topic before he gives his take.
Yeah. Yeah, seems like he's giving a little pop quiz to his audience here, but it's an issue I would have to disagree on. Like, if I became a Muslim tomorrow, God forbid, if somehow I saw, you know what they do, they have all these scientific miracles, and contrary to what Ali Dawah says, these have not been debunked, and it's actually obviously the true inspired word of Allah, and I now convert to Islam, I would still view the Qira'at as the result of textual errors by reciters and by copiers of the Quran. So, but anyway, he's got a different perspective.
By the way, you wouldn't be out of line with what the early Muslims believed in, and I have multiple sources that say that. You have, like the guy who compiled, so how it started was like you had 7 readings compiled at first, like the 7 readers, and then that was in the 10th century, Ibn Mujahid, and then Ibn al-Jazari came around the 15th century, and he added 3 more readings, so that's when you get the 10. And so this guy Ibn Mujahid, who introduced these 7 readings in terms of making them authoritative across the Muslim world, he has become the kind of cornerstone of this science of qira'at. Like he's become the cornerstone of it. He didn't start it, but he's become like the cornerstone of it. And so this guy, in his book on the 7 readings, this is like his foundational, like the fundamental work on the establishing them. He says that over and over, oh, this person made a mistake, this one made a mistake, this one made a mistake, and it's all over the place. Like I think Shadi Nasser, in his book, he notes like 66 times, and I don't know if that's exhaustive or it's just an example, like of 66 examples, but at least 66 times where he's just saying, yeah, this reader was wrong, this reader is wrong, and then you start reading like At-Tabari, who's also a 10th century Muslim, and you start seeing, well, he said this one was wrong, this one's mistaken, and it's like, well, wait a minute. They had completely different views on the different readings of the Quran, because today, someone like Farid would say, these are all divinely inspired. They all come, Muhammad said it like this, and he said it like that. He said like both ways, all the ways. He said all these ways, and they're all inspired, they're all divine. But the early Muslims, all the time, they were just saying things like, this one's a mistake, this one's wrong, and this one's... It's like, where'd you guys... and then there's like a shift that seemed to have happened... I don't know exactly when it is, maybe like 13th century or something, when all of a sudden you have some Muslim scholars starting to say, hey, you guys know when Ibn Mujahid said that there are mistakes in their readings, and Ibn al-Tabari said that, and their students, yeah, they were actually wrong, and here's why they were wrong. And so it's like, the later Muslims are going back and trying to correct history and say, yeah, these guys were wrong for this reason. So yeah, you'd be in line, God forbid, with the early Muslims if you believe that as a Muslim. And this Muslim who's asking the question, if he actually does believe that there are mistakes, that's a position that the early Muslims held to. In fact, Yasser Qadi, Farid knows better than anyone because he's the one who leaked the emails. That's his position.
Good job, Farid.
His position is, yeah.
Yeah, and so the impression that people are going to get from Farid in his videos on this is this has been like a settled deal, and people have always understood this. And yeah, when you actually look at it, even the surface level, this has been a problem in Islam, trying to figure this out. And the people who made the decisions along the way, these are people who Muslims aren't going to want to call them prophets. So how do you think these guys are infallible making these decisions about what is and is not the Quran and so on? So anyway, let's see what Farid's got for us here. I feel like every time he takes a sip, I have to take a sip. I don't know. Is it weird?
It's the curse.
And like if you I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna say anything.
Good. Keep it that way.
So it says because we have chains of it going back to the Prophet. Tayyib. That's one answer. So
Wait, what was that answer? Let's see.
Whatever it was, it didn't sound like he was
and
impressed by
like
it.
if you
Yeah, he said that's one answer. Just want to
you,
check out the different answers.
I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna say anything. So it says because we have chains of it going back to the Prophet.
Because we
Tayyib.
have, because we have isnads. That's what makes it foolproof. Hey, Farid, I could make up a Quran right now and write you an isnad for it.
That's
Yeah, exactly.
one answer. It's all right.
How thirsty are you,
True
Farid?
Legion said, "What is the quest? What was his question?" The problem
Oh, they're not
is,
listening.
yeah, True Legion. The problem is, you guys are focusing on the comments. Focus on the question. Mahmoud Sajid, I believe. Sajid. Ahmed Muhammad, you don't know anything. Oh my God. You don't know anything of basic Arabic grammar, and you're speaking about critiquing qira'at.
Whoa, you got to ask
So
a question.
Ahmed,
Wait, is that Farid saying that to him, or that's the dude saying that to Farid?
Yeah, no, he's reading the comments.
Yeah,
and
the chat.
Yeah, it sounds like someone in the chat said that to the guy who originally asked the question, and Farid just kind of reading out his comments. So,
Yeah, they think he's a Christian or something.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, this whole
I'm-
chain thing. He didn't sound like he was impressed with that answer about that we have chains. I mean, I think Farid knows that the chains that they rely on, they're like chains of people that are like liars, fabricators, and all sorts of horrible stories about
Mhm.
them. He's not really impressed by that. In fact, Farid knows that he knows for a fact that Hafs is called a liar over and over, and he's called a thief and a fabricator and someone who stole books and things like that. So
Awesome had a bad memory.
yeah, he knows that stuff. So I don't think he's impressed by that answer.
There's a song called Chain of Fools. That's what I call the chains. The Chain of Fools.
The chain of fools.
it's speaking about. It's not speaking about qira'at and critiquing. It's the brothers speaking about the concept. The brothers speaking about the concept in general. Prophet Muslim says because the meanings actually complement each other. That's one.
Yeah,
Nope.
we hear that too. So guys, keep in mind, for years we heard not one letter's difference. And then when people found out about the differences, then it became, oh yeah, but that's just because people speak different dialects. And so it's like different accents. That's what we heard. It's different accents. And so that was the new explanation. And then it came out that no, these things are not different dialects. They have different meanings. And then it was, oh, but the meanings complement each other. The meanings complement each other. And so basically every new thing that people find out about the Quran, these guys have to come up with a new story and a new explanation.
Yeah.
Not surprising though, since that's what their prophet had to do.
Yeah.
That's another reason.
Yeah, I mean, So,
Okay.
you could say that for some of the readings. Like you could say, like, oh yeah, this adds a complementary kind of detail or something. But you can't say that for all of the readings, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are some readings that are clearly contradictory to the point where some Muslim scholars. We have a quote from Ashankhiti, for example, where he literally says that in chapter 11, verse 81, the story of Lot's wife. He literally says that there's a contradiction. And we've done a stream with you where we went over like a whole bunch of contradictions. So yeah, it doesn't work. That explanation doesn't work for all of the differences. It works for some of them, but you also have contradictions, irreconcilable things that you just can't say. Oh, these just complementing meanings. Like for example, you have different legal rulings, right, that are given as well. You can't say like, oh, they're just complementing each other. No, because one school of Islamic law is basing a law, how to practice Islam based on this reading. And then you have another school basing it on the other reading. And it's like, they're not complementing each other. One of them saying this is the correct one, and the other one saying this is the correct one.
Yeah, and I guess the overarching theme that you find in Muslim dawah with regards to the Quran is they give some they find out what the other person knows, and then they give some overly simplistic explanation for what that person has found out. So if the person doesn't know anything, they say perfect preservation right down to the letter. Very simple simple idea. Every Quran in the world completely matches up every other Quran. It's false, but it's simple. Or if you find out that there are these differences, then, it's just different accents. Like you've solved the problem. It's just like different accents. You've solved the problem, but simple to understand. We understand what it's like to have different accents. And then people find out more about the Quran and then, oh yeah, but it's complementary. And so, okay, so yeah, it was revealed in these different ways because they had complementary meanings and so on. It's still a little confused, like why would Allah reveal it with these in these different ways to give these complementary meanings and so on? And then you find out, no, they actually can have different rulings on issues and even contradictory meanings. And so then I don't know what Farid's going to say about those because I haven't seen his response to that. But he's still in line with dawah in the sense that he's making it sound like this is kind of a simple issue, when the real takeaway from the Yasser Qadi interview was these guys have no clue what's going on, and it's one massive mound of confusion.
Yep.
All right, back to our buddy here.
Skullinator says, what's the question?
Skullinator?
Hey, shufa, I was writing a question. All you punks. There's like 100 people. There's 103 people here, and like 2 people heard the question. I'm so disappointed in you guys.
Farid calls 101 people punks.
Punks.
Ahmed says Quran is transmitted with tawatur. That's another one.
Ooh,
There's
He's still not impressed. He's still not
very
impressed.
easy way of approaching it. There's a very easy way of approaching it.
Yeah, and the easy way of approaching it is because I say so, and I'm the dawah guy. And that's what you're supposed to do, Muslims. You're supposed to believe whatever your dawah guys say.
Yeah, just repeat after me.
If
Repeat.
there was one answer, why are there so many different answers from the Muslims?
Yeah.
Farid's going to give the super official answer.
Let's see.
Yusuf Zahran says, all qira'at, 10, we have confirmed today, is actually all mutawatir to the Prophet Muhammad, and they are not contradictory, they are compatible. Assassin says, Rasul.
They just said they're not contradictory, they're compatible. That's interesting. We're gonna see. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, that's not true. We already addressed that. We brought up 1181, for example. That literally is a contradiction.
Are they all mutawatir?
And they're not. They're
It's
not.
true.
I mean, this idea, I don't think you can find that concept for like the first 5 centuries of Islam. This idea of like tawatur, in being introduced to the Quranic readings and things like that. You don't see that. That's a later innovation that they kind of came up with. But the early Muslims, like At-Tabari, for example, he never said anything about like tawatur, and So by the way, this idea of like tawatur, this means that something has so many narrations or so many chains for the same exact thing that it's just undeniable. It's like, the sun setting, for example, as like, you have so many different people reporting the same thing from all different areas or whatever. It's just undeniable. But
which is
actually,
which is not even all Sahih hadith and mutawatir, only like a very small percentage of
yeah.
hadiths, even from Sahih or mutawatir, you're talking like less than 5%.
Now,
Yeah.
so on that issue, so we know what that means with regard to different hadiths. So when he's talking about different kirat, uh, is he saying that each one of the 10 is known from so many different chains that what like again I understand it with hadith. What's he saying about it with regards to the Quran, applying the same thing?
That's what he said. That's what he's saying, that all these 10, at least that's what one of his answers from the chat said, that all 10 have the same number of, huge number of narrations or transmission chains from so many people for all the 10, which is impossible and it's not true.
Yeah, but
we don't have them.
Yeah, he actually doesn't believe that though. Like he doesn't actually believe that there are traceable chains for that. He just takes it by faith by saying things like, "Oh, all the Muslims of this region, they recited the Quran like this, so therefore it must have been." But he doesn't actually have the chains. Like he doesn't have. So, for example, there's Ibn Jazari. He used to have this position. He's that 15th century scholar that Muslims call like the giant of Qira'at studies. He's like the so-called giant of that field, and he used to hold a position that all the readings are they have like tawatur, they're all mutawatir, but actually he changed his opinion and later on, and he said no, actually they couldn't have been, and they've only been narrated to us through single ahad transmissions. They're not mass transmitted to that level. And he actually said for all, like, let's say if you get the 10 qira'at all together, and let's say you have like let's say in like one sentence there's only like, let's say, a couple of words have variations, but for the ones that have all agreement, you could say like you have you have tawatur on those particular words, but for the ones that differ, you don't have that. And so and he also argued that if you have tawatur for something, then you don't need other things. Like they have other criterion for what makes like the the Quran, like what the Quran is. It says they need to like align with the Uthmanic codices, like the script of Uthman needs to align with Arabic grammar, agree with Arabic grammar, etc., etc. So if you have those are just two, but there's three criterion that they use. But and then if you add the fourth one of tawatur, it's like you don't need the other ones, because if something's tawatur, it doesn't need to align with Arabic grammar or not. It's like this is something that just apparently just self-evident because so many people have known it. So the giant of these studies, and like I said, early Muslims didn't believe this for the Quran. In fact, I have a video here. I have a video here from Muhammad Hijab during the interview with Yasser Qadi, and he says that, yeah, and he says that his scholar Akram Nadwi doesn't believe that the qira'at are mutawatir. Check it out. Listen to this.
Uncomfortable, but it's just to make things uncomfortable. As you know, I spend a lot of time with Sheikh Akram, yeah, and we had these conversations about the qira'at. His view is that okay, the qira'at are not mutawatir.
They're not.
He made that public. It's not something which is on his YouTube page. Many people for many years, if you look at the early times you had of, I don't know, Tabari or whatever, it's clear that the question of tawatur was not always a straightforward one with all 10 qira'at.
So there you go. His scholar, his Sheikh Akram Nadwi, doesn't believe that the 10 readings are mutawatira, and he says that the early Muslims, this wasn't a straightforward question. So
they're not mutawatir.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there would have been agreement on everything, and there isn't. You don't find that.
Yeah, and that's kind of my issue with Farid. Again, they just give all these overly simplistic responses to things, and they pretend that this is just really straightforward and simple, and it's a mess. It's a total mess. And anyway, I don't know what to do. So anyway, the point is, if you watch Farid, he's sitting there answering these questions, and by the end you'll get, oh yeah, Muslims have this figured out, and Muslims are all on the same page, and Muslims understand this, and this is pretty easy to understand, and all this goes back to Muhammad, and it's complete nonsense. Even if Farid wants to say this is what he believes, representing it as this is so clear, and it most certainly isn't.
Yeah, and another example to show that Muslims don't have this, this concept of tawatur, it's like a joke because um, today, to this very day, Muslims can't agree on whether the Bismillah is actually a part of the Quran or not. So you have like the Malikis who say that the Bismillah is not a part of the Quran at all, except for like the one time it appears in chapter 27, verse 30. Then you have the Hanafis who think that the Bismillah is not like a verse in and of itself, but it's just kind of like a chapter divider. So it's not like a verse, but it's like more like a chapter divider. And you have other schools that say different things. We have a quote here from Sheikh Ashankiti. We referenced him earlier, where he admits that there's a contradiction in chapter 11, verse 81 between the different readings. But he says
The scholars differed concerning the Bismillah, which is in the name of Allah, at the beginning of every surah, or only at the beginning of Al-Fatiha, or is it not a verse at all?
so he doesn't
So
even
he doesn't know.
So again, imagine if like Muslims are saying that, hey, the Quran is so we know exactly what the Quran is, but yet they don't even know if Muhammad said this as part of the Quran or not. They don't even know if he said this was part of the Quran. And I think Daniel says that, actually. I think I have a clip of Daniel saying that. Let me just see what this clip
It's literally
is.
the first line when you crack open the Quran is Bismillah.
Yeah.
And they don't know if it's part of the Quran or not.
Yeah, I think Daniel admits it here too. Let's
Yeah,
see.
he does.
A very well-known disagreement is on the Basmala. Bismillah. Is that part of every surah of the Quran? Is it only part of Surah Al-Fatiha? There is a well-known disagreement among the schools of thought on this.
Yeah, see, there you go. So again, oh yeah, we have like complete knowledge of what the Quran is. Okay, is Bismillah part of the Quran? Oh, we don't know. Some scholars say it is. Some scholars say that it's like you just say it for a blessing. Some scholars say like it's a chapter divider. So they don't even know if the Bismillah, like in the name of Allah, if that's part of the Quran or not. But yet, Muslims have this knowledge of, oh, we have these chains that go back to Muhammad. We know exactly how he said the Quran. Okay, so did Muhammad say the Bismillah as part of the Quran or not? Oh, we don't know. Some scholars say yes, some say no. So where is this tawatur then? Where is this like mass agreement?
Yeah, this is again, everything is massively, and I would say deceptively oversimplified. In that you've got a crowd of, and I'm not just picking on Farid here. This is dawah in general. It's a person finds out something that conflicts with what the dawah guy has told them in the past, and they'll ask for an explanation, and then you give them the new, overly simplified explanation based on the new information that this person has. But the requirement is you always pretend like this is simple and easy to understand, and that everyone agrees on this, when it's just not the case. It's just not the case. Dawah, ladies and gentlemen.
Sallam said Allah revealed the Quran in seven ahruf. So that's what. So that's about it. When it comes to that, it's a good answer. That's actually one of the better answers.
It's a better answer according to you. It's a stupid answer for anyone else, Farid.
Yeah, because no one knows what the ahruf are. It's like, yeah, that's a great answer. Okay, so Farid, what are the ahruf? Oh, I don't know. So how do they account for all the differences that you have in the Quran today? Oh, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, it's like, you go to the Muslim scholarship on what the ahruf are. You're gonna be all over the place. You get into the scholarship of, do the ahruf even exist today or not? Some say, oh yeah, one of them exists. Some say all of them exist, and some say, oh, there's an undocumented number of them that exist that's compatible with the Uthmanic versions of the Quran. And so it's not a good answer at all.
Yeah, that's terrible, guys. That's terrible, everyone who's watching. So just to recap once again, this was supposedly, if you trust the hadiths on this issue, then this was supposedly brought up during Muhammad's time. Hey, why are we reciting the Quran differently? There is a perfectly simple, easy to understand explanation. Namely, Muhammad's memory was not perfect, and so he made mistakes over time. Muslims don't want to say that. And Muhammad didn't want to admit that. And so Muhammad, according to these hadiths, said, oh yeah, Allah revealed it in these different ways, these different ahruf. He revealed it in these different ways. And so you have at least the concept that early on in Islam there were differences in the way people were reciting the Quran, and that Muhammad said it was revealed in these ways. Fast forward to today, and you've got different Qurans in different parts of the world, and the hill that Farid wants to stand on is saying that these different Qira'at go back to the different ahruf. They're like mixtures of the different ahruf, which then you have to explain how these differences made it through Uthman burning all these Qurans and issuing a standardized version. And so they have to come up with an interpretation of how the ahruf, these differences in the ahruf somehow made it through there and got down to the present time and how they account for the Qira'at. And spoiler alert, there's no good explanation. But you can just say you believe it, which is, I mean, I think that's Farid's response, but
Yeah.
So,
And that's what Yasser Qadhi was saying when he said the relationship between ahruf, qiraat, all these things, like that's where the standard narrative has holes.
yeah.
That's what he was talking about. So and Farid, again, he knows that better than anyone because he's the one who leaked the emails. So he knows that.
Yeah,
But
so
he wants
guys,
to see his audience. Yeah.
yeah, so guys, Jai's pointing out there that when Yasser Qadhi's famous holes in the narrative, his famous holes in the narrative interview, that was not simply about differences in Qurans and so on. Like lots of people took it that way, and we kind of made fun of it for that because it was still the by far the dominant view among Muslims that the Quran has been perfectly preserved right down to the letter. And so he's saying the standard narrative has holes in it. We used it quite a bit for that, saying, ha ha ha, he admits that the standard narrative you guys believe in is wrong. When what he's actually talking about, of course there are all these differences and so on. He's talking about whether Muslims can actually explain these differences in terms of ahruf and the Uthmanic recension and the Qira'at today, whether they actually have an explanation for how all of this makes sense. And him pointing out that as Muslim scholars will act like this is a settled issue. And he said non-Muslim academics are crossing these lines that we don't cross and saying, hey, this explanation doesn't work. It. And he says famously, and they're right because they're quoting your own sources. In other words, when Muslim scholars come up with an explanation for how you ended up with these differences, and they say, yes, this all goes back to Muhammad somehow, then what Yasser Qadhi's pointing out is, then when a non-Muslim comes along and says, actually, that doesn't work, let me show you, I'll show you from your own sources why that explanation doesn't work, he's sitting there going, we all just accept this explanation of this thing, and we know these guys are right because they're quoting our own sources to us. And so that was Yasser Qadhi. Yasser Qadhi came out and admitted that they can't explain these things yet. He's still working on an explanation, but the key takeaway as far as what Farid is saying here is Yasser Qadhi didn't believe that you can just explain the different Qira'at in terms of the 7 ahruf and so on, and that is enough for Farid to want to expose him.
Other stuff.
This is interesting. Check out what Adam says.
Wouldn't it be funny if after each sip he went, that would have been funny. Do that next time, Farid.
The concept of qira'at didn't develop gradually. It was there from the start, and everyone acknowledged it. It's a good answer.
Yeah,
It's a good answer.
wait, you say it's there from the beginning and everyone acknowledged it? Hang on.
Wow.
This is interesting. Check out what Adam says. The concept of qira'at didn't develop gradually. It was there from the start, and everyone acknowledged it. It's a good answer.
What?
That's a good answer.
Well, the concept of ahruf is there. I mean, I'm not entirely convinced that we trust the hadith on this issue because we know that tons of hadiths were being fabricated. So it's always possible that later Muslims are trying to explain why they have different Qurans, and then they just write a hadith where Muhammad says, oh yeah, it was revealed in a bunch of different ways. But it does sound like something that Muhammad would have said when differences are brought up to him. And it fits in with other hadiths about Muhammad's memory not being perfect and so on. Hey, look at Farid here.
Looks like he's asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Farid. Hey, Farid, next time you make one of these videos, and it's like, let's say 10 minutes or something like that, you make a video and you're just sipping on your coffee or tea or camel urine or whatever, do this after each gulp. Do this. Go. Do that. And if you do that in one video, I won't make fun of Muhammad that entire day. If I see that video, I won't make fun of Muhammad that entire day. So
you can save the Ummah for one day from David Wood's attacks on Muhammad.
But you know what he'll do? He'll do it every day.
Yeah.
So that
no, just that one day. It's a one day offer. It's a one day offer, Farid. And if you don't do it, then how much do you really care about your prophet?
Ooh.
He doesn't look like he cares so much. Look how he's leaning back. Like
look at that. Look at that arrogant look, trying to be Muhammad Hijab here.
So he thinks this is a good answer to say that, oh yeah, all these different readings have been around like since the beginning or whatever. Like how I don't. So the initial question was like, why don't we just say that these are mistakes? And he thinks a good answer to that is, well, they've been around since the beginning, but that doesn't answer the question. Like you can think of any situation where, like, from the beginning, these guys have been making, whatever mistake. And you'd be like, oh, well, these guys have been repeating this mistake since the beginning of their business or whatever. It's like, well, that doesn't mean that it's like, it's something that they intended to do. It just means that, they're making mistakes since the beginning. So the companions, even Muhammad's own child bride, Aisha, had no problems saying that there were mistakes in the Quran. In fact, we have an example where she says that there's 3 examples. Is it 3 or 4? There's 3 examples.
Let me see. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, in this particular one.
In this narration.
In this particular narration. Okay, then this is authentic. Okay, this is
Sahih, according to both Muslim and Bukhari's criterion.
So why don't you we'll just read that.
So it was narrated that he said, I asked Aisha about the grammatical error in the Quran, about Surah 20 verse 63, and Surah 4 verse 162, and Surah 5 verse 69. And she said, oh, son of my sister, this is the work of the scribes. They made mistakes in the book. And the same narration you find also in Tabari's tafsir of Surah 4 verse 162.
So As-Sayuti here, Jalaluddin As-Sayuti, is saying that this is an authentic, sahih chain according to the criterion of Muslim and Al-Bukhari. Okay, so this hadith he's saying is authentic. So you have here Aisha saying that there are scribal mistakes in the book, and that's not it. There's also another one from Ibn Abbas as well. Ibn Abbas as well says, we have this one here as well, which again, this is authentic chain. All of these are authentic according to the narrators of Bukhari.
Yeah, so he would recite a verse as أَفَلَمْ يَتَبَيَّن, which is you don't find in the house today.
Yeah.
It's actually written as أَفَلَمْ يَيْأَسْ, did they not despair? So instead of writing, did they not make it clear, they wrote, didn't they not despair?
And what was his reason for why he recited it that way?
The scribe wrote it whilst drowsy or sleepy. The scribe was sleepy. So guess which one that the Hafs Quran has today is the one that was written when drowsy.
Sorry, there's a little typo here.
it's the one with أَفَلَمْ يَيْأَسْ, which means did they not despair, which is completely different meaning.
Yeah, so again,
maybe
here we have Aisha saying,
maybe Hafs got sleepy.
Well, he was a liar. So whether he was sleeping or awake, he's a liar.
Yeah, and so here you go. This is Ibn Hajar. This is another one like this. Again, it's authentic. So we have 2 examples here where you have Ibn Abbas. Okay, the guy who Muhammad said like this is the basically like the doctor of the like he knows the Quran. This is the guy to go to for the interpretation of the Quran. Okay, and then you have Aisha as well. Which what do the Muslims say? Like half of the knowledge
half of the religion comes from Aisha. That's according to Muhammad.
Okay, so half the religion comes from her, and then this is your best interpreter of the Quran, and they're both saying that there are scribal mistakes in the Quran, and these are both authentic reports. So, yes, Farid, these different readings have been around since the beginning, but your early Muslims, including companions, including Aisha, including wives of Muhammad as well, said that these are mistakes. There's errors made by scribes.
By the way, this is Surah 13, verse 31. The not despair thing.
Yep.
David?
And it's interesting because if I recall correctly, Farid's ultimate response is going to be that you don't attribute these differences to mistakes because that's not orthodoxy.
Right.
And it's like, oh, okay, so what are all these early Muslims were all a bunch of heretics, I guess? Interesting.
Well, you know what? Ibn Taymiyyah addresses that, and he acknowledges, like, some of these differences that we brought up. He acknowledges that you have early companions who would say things like there are mistakes in their readings, or there's corruption in the like errors in from the scribes or whatever. And Ibn Taymiyyah says this is the excuse that they give. They say, you know what? Allah doesn't hold them accountable for that because it wasn't made known to them that this is all like mutawatir or whatever it is. Like,
Oh, I didn't know.
Ibn Taymiyyah, yeah, he knows more than the companions, more than the wives of Muhammad. So yeah, that's their kind of funny excuse. And in fact, when I had the discussion that I referenced with Farid, the same thing that he said about Al-Tabari, he was like, well, Al-Tabari, maybe he just didn't have access to know that had a chain back to Muhammad. So he was just kind of being, he was leaning on the side of, what was he saying? Like trying to be safe or something like that. I said, well, wouldn't it be safe for him to say that it's actually from Muhammad rather than say it's not from Muhammad if it's actually like the Quran? Like he's saying like this is wrong. And according to Farid, what he's saying is wrong is the Quran. It's one of Allah's, divine readings. So by denying that, he's denying the Quran, which today, that would make you outside of the fold of Islam. But back then, he's like, oh no, he just didn't have the knowledge. He didn't know. But yeah, but so Farid knows, but Aisha didn't know, and Ibn Abbas and Ali, and all these other people didn't know. Okay.
Take a couple super chats real quick, and
oh, and the Talmud again.
No, that wasn't what I was laughing at. I was just laughing at this discussion about all this confusion and them. And we've got all this figured out, and we all know this, and it's like you guys are in the entire time from the time of Muhammad down to the present. It's an endless series of trying to make up explanations for the differences. And then you just look at this, and it's like they made up this explanation, then they made up this one, and then they made up this one, and then they made up this one, and then this guy came along and they said, yeah, let's just do that, even though that guy has no authority to make those kinds of decisions. And then this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, and yeah, we'll take what that guy said, and they'll take that guy's. But by now they have this entire like completely man-made view of their text with all these issues. And all these interpretations contradict earlier things and what the companion said and so on. And they just expect us to just take this and say, wow, what you're saying to us right now, Farid, that's what we take as orthodoxy. It's like it's insane. It's weird stuff. Anyway, Nicola here says, what is your opinion on comments about our Lord Jesus in the Talmud? Some of the stuff I read seems really vile. Greetings from Croatia. Keep up the good work. Yeah, a couple of things. One, again, don't believe in the Talmud. So if it says something false about Jesus, then it says something false about Jesus. Two things that are interesting here is sometimes when I'll see a reference from the Groypers or something, I'll look it up and I can't find a word about Jesus in the passage. And so sometimes they are made up. And other times it's kind of understandable in that you had certain people during times when they're actually being persecuted by Christians and so on. And so, you would understand why people want to say something mean about Jesus. But at the end of the day, keep in mind, it's what a rabbi said. It's what a rabbi said. And so do you want to say, therefore, all Jews believe this or something? Because that's what the Groypers do. They'll say, look at this thing that the Talmud says. You see, that's what Jews believe. And you can talk to Jews, and they're like, they've never even heard of that and never even thought it. And so, again, if you want to criticize, it's very simple to criticize something in the Talmud, especially if it's something like bad or a command for violence or something like this. If you want to criticize it, you say, hey, here's what Rabbi so-and-so said. And therefore, if you are a Jew who is an adherent of Rabbi so-and-so, and you always go with his interpretations on things, shame on you, because that's a messed up passage. What you don't do is say, this is what Jews think, right? Because then that's saying something that's false then at that point. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah. I want to say that there's actually people who say that, like, yes, Jesus is spoken about in the Talmud, but not everywhere that, people think it's Jesus is, like our Jesus. Like they say, like, if you put him with like the other rabbis or the other people that he's speaking to, some of them date like 100 years before Jesus, some date like 100 years after, something like that. So Jesus is definitely spoken of in the Talmud. He's definitely spoken of negatively, no doubt about that. But not every reference to what people say is Jesus is actually like our Jesus. That's you can make that's I think that's a fair statement to make. But yeah, it definitely does say negative things, and obviously we would disagree with it. We're like David said, we're Christians. We're not rabbinic Jews, so we're not like bound to believe in it. But if people misrepresent it, then we can correct their misrepresentations. Or if they said something true about it, we can say, yeah, well, that's true, and we don't agree with it. We don't have to agree with it.
And along these lines, I should have recorded it, but I was thinking maybe none of these people wanted to be in a recording. But we were in Tel Aviv. It was after we went to this sort of panel discussion, and anyway, we were hanging out with several people afterwards, and I was on one side of the table, and there were a couple Jews there, and I was telling them some of the Groiper meme stuff. They had no clue what I was talking about. Not just with the Groipers, they had no clue what I was talking about when I was saying, "Hey, the Talmud says this." The Talmud said they had no clue what I was talking about, and they just kept going, "That's a new one to me." And I was talking about passages about Jesus and stuff, and they're going, "That's a new one. That's a new one." It's like, well, it's not a new one. It's been there, but it was a new one for them. So anyway, long story short, guys, what you want to watch out for is when a Groiper comes along and says, "Here's a quotation." If you want to know if it's a quotation, go there, read it in context, see what rabbi is saying it, and so on. And then when they say, so this is what the Jewish bank manager, your Jewish bank manager believes. That's a person you can't take seriously. That is when a person's telling you that is a person you can't take seriously. Let's see. Abu Ahruf. Every Muslim over the history recalls that he can have up to 4 wives, yet not a single one knows what is or are the 7 Ahruf. Priorities. That's clown slam. Nice. That is a good point. It's like, I mean, every da'i right now is like defending child marriage to the death right now. Like, those are the big issues, and these guys still can't even figure out what the Ahruf are and what the Kirat are and so on. Sunan Abi Dawud 203 versus Matthew 622. Yeah, Sunan Abi Dawud 203, that's the eyes of the leather strap of the anus, and then Matthew 622, that's Jesus saying the eye is the lamp of the body. I've pointed those out before. Maybe Allah should have revealed the Quran to a literate man, or given him the book already written, or told him to hire a scribe. Awful management. That's what you'd have to say. It was a pretty disastrous plan to start with. Hey, let's all just, we'll get this book and we'll preserve it by memory. Bad idea. It didn't work out.
Yeah, and even the Arabic script that was used, you have Muslim scholars who say, like, this was an underdeveloped script, and that is the reason why you have a lot of discrepancies and things like that between the different readings, because of the imperfections of the script that was used. Ibn Khaldun goes as far to say that people who think that script was like excellent or great, he calls them idiots. He says, you guys are idiots if you think that this is like the best script to reveal the Quran in, because you have all these imperfections in it. You can mistake this letter for this letter, this letter for that letter. It's a lot. It's a really difficult language without the dots and the vowels. It's like impossible to make out what's going on. And you have examples of that in Islamic literature, to where people are trying to read the Quran, and instead of saying, like, the Quran in chapter 2 verse 2, this book has no doubt in it, or sorry, that book has no doubt in it. It says that book has no doubt in it. One person read the word reba as zeta, which is, instead of saying doubt, he said oil. He said that book had no oil in it. And so that story is used to show that, like, the ambiguity of the script can.
You don't have the oil. You got no oil.
Yeah.
This guy ain't got the oil. We got the oil. You got no oil.
Yeah. And so now this is one of the 7 readers, and they call him Hamza Azayat, like kind of like a play on that. Like, he's like the guy with the oil, like the oil guy, like kind of making fun of him. And so yeah, it's not a good. I mean, like for Hebrew, for example, if you take Hebrew, for example, there's only like 5 letters in Hebrew that are ambiguous in terms of like if you add dots or not. But in Arabic, it's like you have
All
like
over
you
the
can't
place.
make out almost anything, without these dots and marks.
And that's the pattern you see. It's like one disaster after another, or one problem after another caused by what's going on with the Quran. And then someone makes something up, and then the explanation gets treated as like it's as good as gold. And that just happens over and over again until it's happened until it's been happening for 14 centuries. And then you get down to Farid, who just accepts it all. I mean, who just accepts that all this was working out and accepts the explanations that were made up because of the problems. And it's to where the solutions to the problems are beyond ridiculous. It's like you have way simpler explanations for this mess than the one you're putting forward. And Farid will just cling to the whatever makes him feel good about his book. Let's see. Had Allah revealed what the 7 ahruf are and given one kirat, Jews would have corrupted it. Inscrutability creates preservability. Alhamdulillah. Solved. That's a perfect Farid type response. Solved.
Yeah, I wonder if the Torah had like 7 ahruf when Allah revealed it, or the Injil had 7 ahruf, or is it only the Quran that gets 7 ahruf?
Let's see. So what if it say something about Jesus in the Talmud? In 2024, so Jews say anything bad about him other than we do not believe in him. Do Jews call for the unalive of people that believe in him? Why is that an issue? Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Would be, matter of fact, that's something that I say pretty regularly, because the gripers will come along. I'll be pointing out something from the Muslim sources that is causing a problem in the world, and then Talmud will Groiper will say, well, why don't you say it about the Talmud? Why aren't you going after the Talmud? Because look, if there's a problem in the Talmud, and all of a sudden we end up with 2 billion Jews trying to impose that on me, then I'd be happy to respond to it. But as of right now, there's kind of one group that has a large number of followers in the world who are trying to impose it on me. So I'm just going to stick with that for now, until something else until something becomes a bigger issue.
I think we were trying to figure out what this. We're not familiar with the term groiper, but we kind of made out like what it means based off of how you're using it, and we've run into people that are like that. And they'll say things like, "Oh yeah, the Jews would kill you guys for believing in the Trinity because that breaks with the Noahide laws. You're making idols, and you have 3 gods." And they say all this stuff, and it's like, okay, even if you can like prove that from Jewish literature, because there's a debate in Judaism whether or not the Trinity is considered idolatry or not. Some of them say that there's a category called like shatuf, which is like it's like an allowed kind of I don't know. It's not exactly breaking monotheism. It's a debate that Jews have. So I'm saying it's not clear in Jewish law. But even if it were clear that like, okay, like if Jews like ran the world and they had like this halakha that's gonna govern us all, and we were to be put to death by it, it's like okay, that's like you said, that's not happening, and it's never happened in history. There's never been a time in history when Rabbinic Judaism has had like a Jewish run state with Jewish law, and they would just want that to be in Israel anyway. I'm not saying like I would be okay with it if that were the case, like they're putting Trinitarians to death or something. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like they're not trying to take over the world, and this is just all theoretical. Jewish law in terms of those like putting people to death and things like that, that's all theoretical. It's never really been put into practice. There's never been like a Jewish state where they practice rabbinic laws, and so that's just kind of like a tactic that Muslims will use, or like the groypers, like you're saying, like they'll use, and it's just kind of a distraction from the Muslims who actually are putting people to death for their beliefs.
I like this groiped in the brain here. I might start calling them the groipists. I think that sounds funnier to me. Groipists sounds better than groipers to me. Anyway, back to Farid here.
I like that. Let's carry on.
Hey, he likes what we
else?
said.
So far, no one said what I have in mind.
So he's playing like a guessing game. Like, who can guess what I'm thinking?
Mahmoud says, all the qira'ats I read are all the same in meanings. Well, yeah, Mahmoud, I gotta disagree, bro.
Ha ha!
I
Oh,
gotta disagree.
Whoa! Did everyone catch that? So Mahmoud said, hey, I went through some of the different qira'at, and they all say the same thing. It means the same thing. And then Farid, oh, wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. They don't have the same meaning. Let's back this up. Here we go.
Mahmoud says, all the qira'ats I read are...
You know what'd be fun? I don't know why. Anyway, I finally saw that there's a little tea bag thing sticking out of the thing, so I'm guessing that's tea. And then I was thinking, what if there were camel pee bags? Like it's just like it's like dehydrated camel pee, and you get a bag and you stick it in your cup of hot water, and it turns it into a nice hot cup of camel pee. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe they have something like that.
all the same in meanings. Well, yeah, Mahmoud, I gotta disagree, bro.
In your face.
I gotta disagree.
In your face, Mahmoud. I feel like if I cut out all the pauses where he's just reading and all the tea sips, that this video would be like 2 minutes long.
yeah, I think so.
Assassin says, secondly, it is a miracle because it shows the Quran preserved in different areas by multiple people.
Yeah.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle that there are all these differences in the Quran. Okay, so wait, let me get this straight. Giant DOC. When there were no variants in the Quran, that's what we're told. We're told there are no variants in the Quran anywhere. They're all exactly the same, dot for dot, letter for letter. We were told this is a miracle. And then it came out, actually, there are all these differences in the Quran. And it turns out that's the miracle. So if the Quran's perfectly preserved right down to the letter, that's a miracle. If there are all these variants, that's the miracle. It doesn't matter what the case may be. 0 variants, a trillion variants, it's all a miracle. This is that kind of that kind of gives you an idea. That kind of gives you an idea of what you're dealing with here. These are people who just call anything a miracle. We'll just call anything a miracle. This is wild stuff. All right, Farid.
Okay. Bin Khadim says, because they're not mistakes. Best answer, Bin Khadim says.
Just believe me.
I'm
Just
about
trust
to
me,
share
bro.
my view, inshallah.
Man, give us the answer, Farid.
Is
Come
your
on,
new
man.
book digitally available as well? Not at the moment. Maybe one
Farid
day.
wrote a book. I wonder if his book's written in crayon.
YRYSF says, so qira'at have different meanings sometimes. Most of the times, no. Most of the times they're dialectal and they don't change the meaning.
I should have cut out all these long pauses. But if I did, I knew Farid's followers would be like, oh, you're editing what he said and changing it. And all those places you cut out, that's when he was saying super brilliant stuff. Yeah.
When he's not actually sipping camo urine, he's actually answering the question. That's
Zila says, شلون وصلت الناس على 7 أحرف في نفس الوقت؟ هل الرسول
Answer the
There's a
question.
format issue.
Answer.
الرسول
Answer.
يكرر.
Answer.
أو كان يكرر
Can't
الآية
read
7
our-
مرات وقت نزولها. I don't think so. I don't
Oh, he
think
doesn't think
So
so.
he's asking, the Arab person is asking, how is it that they got the 7 ahraf at the time of Muhammad? Did Muhammad repeat every verse 7 times?
Yeah, like did he repeat everything 7 times?
And he said no.
Oh, he said he doesn't think so. He doesn't think so.
Well, he doesn't know then.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't think so.
Yeah, and I actually
That's fun.
the issue even going back then is, so you go back to the different ahruf, and this gets brought up to Muhammad because his companions are reciting the Quran differently, And so it gets brought to him, hey, we're reciting this Quran differently. Who's right? And his response is, no, 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 my good man. Allah revealed it in all these different ways. And so, the obvious issues that come up is, okay, why weren't his companions familiar with this? Why didn't they know about this? Why is this new information to them? You seriously saying that Muhammad's been revealing the Quran in all these different ways for all these years, and no, so 2 decades by that point, Muhammad's been revealing the Quran. No one ever knew that he's revealing the Quran in all these different ways. If you look at that and you actually like assign probabilities and so on, you can as a Muslim, and as a Muslim you're probably going to, you can take his response seriously, whereas any non-Muslim who doesn't automatically accept what Muhammad is saying is going to look at that and go, that looks awfully suspicious there. That looks really, really, really suspicious. That Muhammad was, all along, he's revealing the Quran in all these different ways, and no one ever caught on to it until they realize that they're reciting the Quran differently. And then, hey, what's going on here? Wait a minute. You've been revealing the Quran in all these different ways for decades now. No one ever caught on to it until you're an old man. Okay, there's an obvious explanation there. But you don't go with the obvious, easy explanation. You go with the ridiculous and absurd explanation. But that's the pattern, right? It's so you've got 14 centuries of them trying to preserve this book. And in every case, there's an obvious explanation for why you ended up with the differences. And instead of going with the obvious explanation, scribal errors, they go with this absurd explanation. And then they are confused when we don't go with the ridiculous and absurd explanation. So anyway, the point is, if you have an absurd explanation, and then later on you have another absurd explanation, and then later on you have still another absurd explanation, and you have this endless series of ridiculous, absurd explanations, and you constantly refuse to go with the obvious, easy explanation, you can think of all those in terms of probabilities. Like if we were to assign probabilities, what are the probabilities that Muhammad was telling the truth on this issue and he really had received it in all these different ways and it was revealing in all these different ways and his followers just never caught on to it? What's the probability of that versus his memory got foggy and he messed up and then his companions started reciting it differently? Well, you'd have to say it's way more probable that his memory wasn't perfect, because you know that from other things. And so you'd have to say it's way more probable anyway, the point is, you could, in theory, multiply all these probabilities out. And you could say, at the end of it, what's the probability that Islamic orthodoxy of Farid is the correct position? It would be some infinitesimally small little probability that Farid's actually correct here, when you always go with the most absurd interpretation. Anyway, it might be a fun project one day to go through the probabilities there.
Let's get to this, inshallah.
Are you finally going to get to the answer, Farid?
Hope so.
Mahmoud says, I meant in the sense that qira'at don't contradict each other. Yes, of course. They do not contradict each other.
Except when they do.
Hey, did you see this? Did you see this? So that he's responding to the guy who said, but the meanings are all the same. And then Farid, you're wrong. The meanings do change. And then, like a good little student trying to please his teacher, no. What I meant was, they don't contradict each other. Well, that's not the same thing. Saying that the meanings don't, saying that all the meanings are the same is not the same as saying that there are no contradictions.
Exactly.
But it's incorrect to say that.
What's that?
No, I was just saying, he said that, we addressed it, there are contradictions, so he's wrong, Farid's wrong on that. But yeah, the guy just updated his dawah script, like on the spot. He's like,
yeah, because he hit them with the guilt in the beginning. Like he said, this stuff is used by the enemies of Islam and they're not in our shoes. So basically saying, check your loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing he does. They pull on the emotion, and then he says, okay, you give me your answers. So he changed the mood of the room to, let's be pro-Islam, let's not think critically, and bring it back to being pro-Islamic.
Critical thinking about the Quran is what the enemies of Allah do.
It's incorrect to say they have the same meaning. That's inaccurate.
Nice.
Muhammad Dolan says, how could there be mistakes in short Surah Al-Fatiha when 5-year-old kids remember it without mistakes?
Oh, gosh.
They remember it in the Hafs because that's what they're told, and they get beaten in the mosque with a stick if they say it wrong. That's why they remember it.
That guy actually did bring up a good little point. How would you end up with variance? Let me put it this way: if you end up with variance, textual variance, even in the most frequently recited passages of the Quran, what do you think would be the case with the rest of the Quran that they don't recite nearly as much? They're gonna get that. They're gonna get that perfectly. You know, it's fun. It's funny, but when he was let me go back a little bit to what he was just saying right here.
Len says, how could there be mistakes?
When he said, "How could there be?" I was thinking, how can it be grape if there's parental consent? And then he immediately says 5-year-old after that. I was like, oh my goodness, sounded like he was saying something completely different.
The short Surah Al-Fatiha, when 5-year-old kids remember it without mistakes.
So I have something on the screen here I want to show you. So this is something that this is just one verse in Al-Fatiha. This is just one verse, okay? And if you look at this is chapter 1, verse 7. So there's 9 words here, and so here's the first word. This has 4 variants to it. Now I'm not saying these are all canonical variants. They're just kind of, this is the corpus of the differing Qurans that exist through Muslim. It's all through Muslim literature, though. Okay, so most of these are not canonical readings. So canonical readings, very few variations, but we're just talking through Muslim history. So let's say that this one word here has 4 variations to it. This one has 2 variations. This one 3, etc., etc. So what Muslims believe, I've heard Muhammad Hijab say this at least. I don't know if Farid believes this or not. But what Muhammad Hijab believes is that you can just kind of order together the Quran by the variants. Like you can make as many combinations as you want. So you have like a pool of variants for word number 1, and you can choose any one of those variants, and then you can take from that same pool for word number 2. And anyway, I did the math on this earlier, and I see you had a comment from Too Many Marys, and she assisted with the math on this, where you roughly get like around 23,000 combinations for possible ways to utter this one verse, which was just the limited.
It's a miracle.
Yeah. So like I don't know.
So many different Qurans.
Yeah, and that's the same surah that he said the 5-year-old children know.
Yeah.
They just know one version though.
Yeah.
Out of the 4,000, I don't know, 20,000.
Like different ways. So in other words, like if you put these in different combinations, you can get around word number 1 can be replaced with 4 variants, etc. You keep doing that through it, you get about 20,000 different ways to say this one sentence. So here is chapter 1, verse 4. This is this one that comes up a lot, like Malik versus Malik, king versus owner, owner versus king. That one has that one word has 21 different readings. One word. So you can read this one word, Muslims today, they only have 2 variations in the canonical readings. So they'll say Maliki Yawmiddin or Maliki Yawmiddin, like owner of the day of judgment, king of the day of judgment. But actually in the literature, so like historically, Muslims have had over 21 variations of this, one word in one verse. So to think that all Muslims through history recited this chapter the same way is not true. You have people that attribute things to companions who read these different ways. And I mean today, like you go to Morocco, they recite Al-Fatiha different than they would everywhere else in like in the majority of Muslim world. Like you go to Egypt, you go to a mosque in Egypt, you listen to how they recite it, and you go to a mosque in Morocco, you're going to hear Al-Fatiha recited 2 different ways. So like with this one variation here in chapter 1, verse 4. And then there you have other variations amongst the canonical readings. So this is an argument that Muslims bring up a lot, like with variants to okay, yeah, you learn this one when you're a little kid, you go to the mosque, you learn it your whole life, etc. Well, you're learning a version of it
In a point in history.
Yeah, in a point in history. But like if Farid were born in Morocco rather than where he lives now or where he was born, he would have learned it differently. So this is not a good argument, and you have different ways of reciting it. So yeah,
that's all.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, it's another example of you'll have just a Muslim just having this completely like massively overly simplistic view. Well, little kids can, a little 5-year-old can memorize it. Our 5-year-old sons or our 5-year-old wives, they can all memorize Surat Al-Fatiha. So obviously, it's not going to be a problem. And it is a problem. Your theory of what a 5-year-old can and cannot memorize doesn't change the reality that you have tons and tons and tons of textual variance there. And so, anyway, it's gonna, I don't know how long this can continue with giving these simplistic explanations that don't fit the facts when people are now becoming familiar with the facts and people are putting out the facts and so on and showing that the explanations don't work. You wonder how long these guys will continue clinging to these silly little explanations.
Yeah.
Someone get Farid a neck rest.
A neck rest.
That's what you say in your video?
Let me fix my chair.
That's what you say in your video? You're supposed to be explaining
Muhammad says, Shabab, I'm just asking because my brothers who found out about Qur'an freak out.
Oh.
Some not the same meaning, and there are.
Did he just say some people when they find out about the Qur'an, they freak out?
Yeah, that's the original guy who asked the question.
About the mistake.
Yeah, he's kind of giving background to why he asked this question. He's like, because when my brothers found out about it, they freak out. They see differences, they freak out.
Why?
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And think about this. What Farid is getting right here is there is this long tradition in Islam of accepting that there are these different Quran versions and so on. Why has it become a problem, Farid, so that people freak out when they find out about the Qur'an? Why is that a thing that freaks them out now, Farid? And the answer.
Exactly.
What's that? Yeah. The answer, Farid, is because you Dawa guys lied to people. You lied to people and filled them with this false confidence in their book that there's only one version of their book and no textual variance anywhere, no differences anywhere. Dawa guys filled their heads with that nonsense. Muslim scholars filled their heads with that nonsense. Sheikh Yasser Qadi and his dad filled their heads with that nonsense. And then people found out, wow, our scholars and our Dawa clowns are all lying to us. And the amazing part is that they'll continue going back to you. They freak out, but then they'll keep going back to the exact same people who lied to them before. Wild stuff. What a religion. What a religion. Like the more you lie to them, the more they'll come back to you.
Wow. I mean, I'm really happy to hear that. I mean, so this guy's asking the question. I mean, I wonder, because, it's not Muslims that are talking about these issues. It's like, just the non-Muslims who are bringing these issues up. So you have this this Muslim guy and he's got his brothers and they're finding out that there's different versions of the Quran and they're freaking out. That's actually great news. That's great news. We're happy that Farid's reporting on that. And we hope that they continue to realize that Islam is false. And we hope that they continue to do that until they leave Islam. And, we pray that they come to the Lord Jesus. That's what we pray. But that's great news. Thank you for reporting on that, Farid.
Good job, Farid. Good job. People are still freaking out. Here we are years after the holes in the narrative interview, and Muslims are still freaking out. When they find out that there are different Qurans. They simply find out that there are different Qurans, and then they freak out. And so the original question was, why don't we just tell people these are errors, copyist errors, scribal errors, and so on? And Farid is saying, no, you can't go with the easy explanation. We have to blame Allah for being so stupid and revealing it this way. I mean, think about this. That's what they're actually saying. Allah did it this way, and it's so confusing to us that we're freaking out over it.
Wow. So wait a minute. What about Muslims? When Muslims argue for, so this is admittedly for the Muslims a very confusing issue, but when they debate Christians on the Trinity and they say, Tawheed is like this, so easy, so simple to understand. This is how we know God revealed. This is how we know God revealed it because it's so simple. But then, okay, so let's apply that same logic to the Quran now and the different readings. It's like, well, this is, even your own Muslim scholars admit this is one of the most technical, confusing issues. Ever since it's been brought up, it's been confusing. But wait, I thought God couldn't reveal things that are tough and confusing or don't make sense at first glance or something. Like I thought that goes against the debate narrative that they use.
That is absolutely. And so, yeah, why would Allah create and deliberately cause so much confusion in the ummah just by doing it this way? In other words, if he had revealed it in exactly one way and miraculously preserved it the entire time, you wouldn't be having this confusion and all these freakouts, as Farid put it. And so why does Allah deliberately want to do all this? But yeah, it's the same thing here on this issue as it is in Islamic theology with the nature of Allah. They say, oh yeah, you've got confusion with the Bible because you've got textual variants. We don't have that confusion, except we do. You guys have a confusing concept of God. We've got this really simple explanation, unless you read about it actually and look at what we really say. It's I don't know. It's all fake. It's all dawah is just complete fakery.
Yep.
3 more qira'ats that weren't canonized yet. Okay. Ya Allah, ya Allah. You should do a collaboration with Wissam al-Mahdi.
Give us the answer, man. Been waiting, taking 9,000 sips of tea,
Can
and
you
won't
expand
tell
on
us.
your recent video explanation of it? God can wonder, but not in ignorance. Scalinator. I saw someone in the comments saying that the best word is marvel. It's not wonder, it's marvel. I think marvel is a good English translation. You marvel at something. Yeah, it's because it's something rare. It's not like you're ignorant about it. So I think that's a better translation.
Yeah, go with the better one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what he's doing there is he's trying to clean up chapter 37 verse 12, where you have one reading that says like, you Muhammad, you were surprised, you were shocked, and then the other reading says, I was shocked, I was surprised. And he's trying to like get away from that meaning of surprise or shock there. He's like, well, actually, it actually means marvel. That's actually a better translation.
Mm-hmm.
But what does marvel actually mean? Marvel actually means to be filled with astonishment, be filled with wonder about something. And what's astonishment? It means something great surprise. Like you're. So I think he's just unfamiliar with what these terms mean. He's just trying to avoid this problem, because you had early Muslims, going back to Ibn Taymiyyah, where he mentioned this. There was an early Muslim successor. So this guy lived during Muhammad's lifetime, but he didn't actually meet Muhammad, so he's not considered a companion. His name is Shuraih, and he was critical of this reading that said Allah was surprised, and he said, no, it's impossible for Allah to be surprised, because that assumes a state of ignorance. So Muslims did actually have theological problems with that, and you have people who come like Arazi and other Muslims who explain it. They're like, oh yeah, you know how there's places in the Quran where it says Allah deceives and Allah, prays or whatever else. Well, yeah, it means something else when it's God. So so when it's applied to Muhammad, it means he's surprised. When it's applied to Allah, that means something else. So that's their kind of way to kind of try to get out of it. So it's a big problem for Muslims, as you see. Muslims are struggling with that and asking them about it.
But by the way, then rare thing doesn't work, because the tafsir of that ayah is actually that Muhammad was surprised that they would not believe in the Quran. That's not a rare thing. Most people didn't believe in the Quran, at least during Mecca time. So it's not that he's amazed because it's rare. Most people disbelieved until they had the sword on their neck later in Medina.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah.
So this is I have to say, if Allah revealed it in these different ways, and then the meanings, the corresponding meanings have to change when I don't know. This is weird stuff. This is wild stuff, Farid.
And by the way, that's just a simple literally a vowel difference between like it's Ajibta, Ajibtu, that's I was surprised, you were surprised. It's literally a vowel, just a one singular vowel, like vowel mark. So you can see how someone would easily, make that mistake, or even in reciting. Like, even if it's not written down, it's just oral, you could see how someone could just easily, say instead of ooh or whatever. And so, yeah, you had early Muslims who completely denied that reading. And they said, no, if you read it like that, then you're attributing something unknown, of something of ignorance to Allah. And then, Ibn Taymiyyah comes along and says, oh, well, it's okay. He didn't know that this is actually an attribute of Allah, or whatever. And they always try to make excuses, hundreds of years later.
Yeah, so they didn't know, and then you've got Farid, and well, if we just translate it like this, then both meanings. This is wild, man.
Yep.
And then, okay, let me tell you guys something.
Finally.
Okay, thank you.
Let me help you guys out.
He's gonna help us all out. Hey, Farid, the fact that your fans can't give the answer you're looking for, what's that say about you as a teacher?
Mhm.
I could ask people who are watching me right now, how old was Aisha when Muhammad banged her?
9 years. Oh,
Everyone here. Why? Because we do awesome teachings. You've been talking about the Kirat and the Ahruf for years now, and not one of your followers can answer one single question.
That's a great point.
that
Yeah.
is a good point.
Look, the answers are coming in.
Yeah.
9.
Everybody knows now.
They're flooding
Listen to
in.
Osama
Nine.
al-Wa'adh only when he's next to me.
Come on, give the answer, man.
Did he-
Okay.
Did he
Best
say he's gonna
guys,
answer
too many
and then-
questions. Too many questions.
Okay.
Let me. Just
I don't like all the questions, and neither does Allah.
Okay. So here's the thought.
Okay.
The natural, folks. The natural
Yes, we got it.
assumption when you have. I hope you have a great night. لا يا حبيبي, stay يا محمود.
Oh, come on, dude.
Stay. Give me 1 minute, bro.
He's gonna
Guys,
say good night. Good night, Habibi.
I
good
wish
night.
I wish I were in the chat. I'd be like, shut up, everyone, let him answer. Oh boy.
Oh man.
Let me explain something to you. The natural assumption when you have variants attributed to a specific text is that it's a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
This is the natural assumption. If you see any text, a book, a poem, a saying, a sermon with multiple wordings, the most common assumption, the natural assumption, is to assume these are mistakes.
Yeah, so if you have multiple copies of something and there are variants, the natural explanation, as Farid pointed out, would be that there are mistakes. I would say that's the case for things that are written by hand. The natural explanation, or just the one you would naturally come to, is that scribes were making errors. You can also, a secondary view would be that there were edits. Like you can have edition 1 of a book, edition 2 of a book, edition 3 of a book, and there, it's normally, you're not interpreting it as mistakes. It's just, hey, we, more information has come in, and we've come up with a better perspective, and so they're making changes like that. It could just, you could just have something like if a person wrote a book and then edited it years later, he might want to make some changes. He might say, oh, let me make some changes, and so you could end up with differences like that. The point here is, whether you say a person was editing it or came up with new information and therefore wanted to modify it, or it's just scribes making mistakes and so on, the consistently least obvious explanation would be that God just revealed it in all these different ways and was doing it like this for years and no one ever noticed until eventually they did, and then you got and then after it came out that there are differences, then the explanation came out. And so, yeah, but let's see where he's going with this.
Okay. So when you find centuries of scholarship all agreeing that there are multiple recitations to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, or that there are multiple ways of reading the same book, then this shows that this is the orthodox position.
Wow. Wasn't that one of the answers someone else gave earlier? That they just said, like, these readings have been around since the beginning. Like they just think someone in the chat said that to him earlier.
He was going in a bit of a different direction with it. What he's saying there is, since the obvious interpretation of variance, the natural interpretation, what he just said, the natural interpretation, if you end up with a bunch of variants in copies of a book, since the natural explanation would be someone made mistakes, and yet you have in the history of Islam centuries of Muslims saying, no, it was revealed in this way. it must just be orthodoxy. So because why wouldn't, in other words, why wouldn't they go with the easy, obvious explanation? Scribes made mistakes. Why not go with that? And he's saying that shows you how deeply ingrained this is in Islam, that all these centuries of people went with the least obvious explanation, and they went with this, like, what we would regard as silly and absurd explanation. Why were they clinging to that explanation when there's this way easier explanation the entire time right in front of their faces? Why do they cling with what looks like the most absurd explanation of all? That must just be the Islamic position. And that shows you that it's part of Islam. And therefore, why shouldn't you say that these are scribal mistakes? Because it's not the orthodox position. Muslims have been clinging to this position for so many centuries that if you deviate from that position, you're not orthodox anymore. And so look at what he's saying. He's not saying because of this great evidence or something like this, or here's the proof that these aren't textual variants. It's just, here's what the Muslim community has accepted. And therefore, you're not orthodox if you say these are scribal
Yeah,
mistakes.
it's really funny because even if you grant that these, do go back to the beginnings of Islam, it doesn't really answer the question of whether they're mistakes or not. Because you had people like, for example, Al-Tabari, for example, he definitely believed that there were different readings that were divine, but he also believed that there were mistakes amongst readings as well. So you can accept both. You can say both. You can say, yeah, these are readings that go back to Muhammad, but there's also readings that are mistakes that Farid today believes are canonical and divine. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you could say these go back to Muhammad, but this is a mistake, or this is, for whatever reason. Like sometimes they would say, well, this is not grammatically correct, or this one doesn't make sense, or for whatever reason that they were saying. But they weren't arguing like, oh, we have a valid chain for this that goes back to Muhammad. Like for that reading, for chapter 1 verse 4, go back to Al-Fatiha, like the owner versus king. Al-Tabri's argument wasn't that, oh, we have chains for both of these, they both go back to Muhammad. His argument was, well, the reading of king makes more sense and it adds more glory to God because and it also makes more sense in the context, and he gives his reasoning why. He basically says that it's known that everybody that is a king is necessarily an owner, but the adverse is not true. You can be an owner but not a king. So he said that's why this is the superior reading, the more correct reading. So when you say more correct reading, you're not saying that, oh, these are both from God, or what. You're saying, no, one of them is a better, more correct, more accurate reading. So yeah, I don't think his answer saves the day.
And
No,
also,
okay.
sorry, if it's such orthodox position, how many qira'at were there? Because we know that before the time of Mujahid, there was more than 70. And then he limited them to 7 for randomly, without any reason. And it's said that there were better readings out there that he neglected.
Yep.
And with more honorable transmitters. And even some, and the quote is, and people have mentioned in their books more than 70 readers who are of higher rank and more virtuous status than these 7 that were chosen by Ibn Mujahid. So my question is, if it was so orthodox, how many were there to begin with? Where did they come from? Why was it just limited to 7? And why were 3 then added later, also for random reasons, if it was so orthodox?
Right.
That's what I would ask.
And that's an ongoing issue, that you have all these decisions about different Qurans and so on. These are made by later Muslims, Muslim scholars and so on. And according to Farid, these guys are defining orthodoxy. It's like, I mean, imagine that if you're Ibn Mujahid and you sit down and make a decision, you are defining orthodoxy for the Muslim community forever, so that centuries in the future, Farid will just be going, because it's not orthodoxy, and that's why we do it. It's just a decision some guy made at some point.
You know what's interesting is that
Man-made religion.
I think this is really interesting that when you look at like the early, I mean, not just you have from time of like the early church until today, you have this very, 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 very high view of the Bible. And then you have like this German critical scholarship that came about, and then you have some kind of more liberal scholars, and sometimes even conservative scholars. They'll say things like, okay, yeah, there's, maybe this is like a error here, or this is mistaken here. And not that I believe there's any errors or mistakes in the Bible, but I'm just trying to draw a contrast here. So you have like the church historically always saying, yeah, there's no errors in the Bible, no contradictions, no problems with it at all. And that's always been like the historic view that's the traditional view. And then you have some people who deviate from that later on in history. But it seems like the opposite happened in Islam, where the early Muslims were the ones saying, oh no, there are mistakes here, scribal errors here, things like that. And then later on, the position became, actually, there's no mistakes at all. These guys earlier were just all mistaken. So it's like the opposite kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the only position where the longer you go, the more they know, right?
Yeah.
It's I mean, normally you would think that the earliest people, they know the most, and you find out no. In Islam, it's the reverse. The people who were the earliest, they're the most ignorant, and it's later Muslims who somehow know the most. It's like, what information can you get about Muhammad from the first century of Islam? Pretty much nothing. But later on, you start getting the collections start getting bigger and bigger and bigger of all the information that you have. It's like, how are they learning more as they go along if they're not just inventing it?
More.
Yeah, they make up more.
They make up as they go along.
Yeah, that's the obvious explanation. That's what they keep going with, the least obvious explanation. But yeah, you have the parallel as far as with what Farid's position about the Quran here, when it's later Muslim scholars, and even if the later Muslim scholars are contradicting earlier Muslims and even companions of Muhammad, you go with what the later Muslims say. It's a parallel to like they're to multiple things, but one of the things that's in my mind is a parallel is like the satanic verses, in the sense that the first century of Islam, everyone acknowledges this. It's obvious. It's indisputable. Later Muslims, they changed their theology. Because for the first century and a half, the doctrine of Allah's protection of the prophets was that Allah would protect a prophet from persisting in error. So a prophet could commit an error, even a major error, but God's going to bring him out of that error. So that's the doctrine of God's protection of the prophets. Later Muslim scholars and theologians, they changed the doctrine, and the doctrine changes to God will protect a true prophet from committing any sort of major error. So Allah's protection of the prophets isn't that, yes, you could commit a mistake, but Allah's going to take you out of it. He's going to protect you that way. He's going to protect you from persisting in it. The doctrine changes to he's going to protect you from ever committing it. And then they have to rewrite the history. And then they throw out the story of the satanic verses, because the story of the satanic verses fit perfectly with the original doctrine. Like, that's the story. Muhammad said you can pray to these 3 pagan goddesses. And then Gabriel came up to him and said, what are you doing? Why'd you say that? And then so he gets corrected. So it fit perfectly. Later, when you say Allah won't allow you to commit any major error, it changed to, no, that never happened. And so you actually have later Muslim theologians and scholars and so on. They make these decisions, and then they rewrite the entire history of Islam. And Muslims just go with whatever these guys say. And so they'll say, okay, all these early guys were ignorant, or they were liars, or it was all fabricated, or something like this, because of what the later Muslim says. Instead of saying, hey, if the later Muslim contradicts your earliest sources, then why are you going with the later Muslim? Anyway, it's the same thing here. It's, hey, you have all these early Muslims, and they're saying one thing. Later guys come along, they make decisions, and you just go with what they say. Fun stuff. Fun religion.
It's Islam.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the first point. That's one point. What did Adam say? Adam had a good point. I forgot what Adam said. Folks, remind me what Adam said.
Well, how good
Adam,
was
remind me
point?
what you said. Yeah, Adam. It was a good point.
So good.
But yes, the first thing is, the natural assumption is that these are mistakes. When everyone is saying, no, the Quran is actually revealed in multiple modes, then this makes sense. Then this has to be the orthodox position.
You had me until you said this makes sense, Farid. This doesn't make sense at all.
The second
Here we go.
piece of evidence
Second powerful piece of evidence
is that they're like much of the variants are dialects.
Huh?
When you have multiple dialects, you don't assume that these are mistakes. أيوة شوفوا check out what Adam says. He says قراءات were not developed gradually. They were there from the start and were acknowledged. That's it.
He just said the kirat were there from the beginning and were acknowledged.
By who?
Yeah, by who? Where was Ibn Mujahid in the beginning?
Hafs wasn't born then.
Yeah, he was.
I don't even know what to do at this point. Yeah, they were acknowledged all along.
By
They were
who?
acknowledged all along. And this, guys, this is everyone who's watching. This is Farid can say that because he thinks that you can explain all the kirat in terms of the ahruf. And so if he says, hey, the ahruf go back to the beginning, therefore the kirat go back to the beginning, and so on, not realize that's what's under investigation, Farid. That's what's under investigation, whether you can explain these things as somehow going back to the ahruf. That's what's in dispute. And we think your explanations are terrible and awful. And you're treating your interpretation as just the orthodox position, that somehow all this goes back to the ahruf, and therefore they always knew about the kirat, and they've always been affirmed.
If they were
Yeah.
not there from the start,
I think that also, like, if he's admitting that, a lot of differences between the, qira'ats, like alayhim, alayhum, like they're just dialectical or whatever. But then Muslims also agree that the ahruf are not dialects differences because, they're from different tribes. They're two, like they're both from both from Quraysh, from the same tribe. If that's agreed upon, like, by most Muslims, of course you have deviant opinions and stuff like that, but most of them, they know they're not dialects. Well, then the qira'at that are dialects, how can they be derived from the ahruf if the ahruf aren't dialects?
And notice also that he oversimplified again. He said everyone agreed. That's
Yeah.
not the case.
Yeah, that's the other ongoing problem, because you guys have been pointing out that no, you've had a bunch of different perspectives, and if you go back to early Muslims, they did understand things as scribal errors and things like that. And so, I mean, it's multiple things. So you've got ahruf. Farid will pretend he knows what the ahruf are. He doesn't. He's taken a position. He's given his interpretation that he then treats as if it's as good as gold, when in reality, no one has any clue. Because anyway. So no one knows what the ahruf are. He takes his perspective on them and treats it like it's as good as gold. And then he has his view of what the kirat are, that they ultimately go back to the different ahruf and so on, which he also... You can have all kinds of different perspectives on this. He just goes with his perspective, and then I don't know. It's just over and over again. He makes a decision on something and goes with the scholars who have affirmed that position, and then acts like that's the only position, and then here's the big step: acts like it makes sense. It's this, therefore this makes sense. This is my position, and here's people who agreed with me, and therefore it makes sense. Farid, that's what we're pointing out. The position doesn't make sense at all. Not sure what to do here.
Yeah. And notice how, like, you could say, oh yeah, these differences in different Qurans did go back to the beginning, to the point where you have, like, Ibn Masud, for example, saying, like, yeah, I'm not gonna give Uthman my Quran to burn, and I'm ordering the people of Kufa, don't give your Qurans up.
Because
so
of
they weren't
different
all saying-
dialects. Different dialects.
Yeah, we're just gonna burn all these different dialects.
He used to scrape two surahs from the Mus'haf. He used to remove them from the Mus'haf.
Yeah.
Surah 113 and 114. He took them off.
Yeah, and that's Ibn Taymiyyah acknowledges that. He's like, yeah, you had some companions who took off 2 surahs, and you had other companions who added
surahs.
two.
Yeah.
So you have
We
some
don't
companions.
we don't have those surahs in my dialect.
Yeah,
There's no way to say those words in my dialect, and therefore Allah can't reveal them in my dialect.
Yeah, exactly. And so
Sad.
it's like, okay, so they don't agree on what the Quran is. So if he wants to say, like, there's disagreement among the companions on what the Quran is, and you have some companions who say things like, oh, they're trying to make me say the Quran like that, but I'm not going to, because I think that they're misguiding me. But that has become like the standard reading. So yeah, I mean, he's right that all the companions disagreed on these different readings, and maybe what he's saying is like they disagreed. They all thought that they got it from Muhammad, but they didn't agree that there's like this. They thought that the others were wrong. Like they thought the others were wrong. They didn't just think like he revealed them all these different ways. Like they go to Muhammad saying, which one is it? Is it this way or is it that way? So it's like they didn't just think like, oh yeah, these all came from him. No, they didn't think that. But
If this was a view
But Farid knows better.
yeah.
that was introduced later on, you'd have these two views. You'd have two views.
Whoa! Did you just catch what he said? So
did
he's saying you had the fact that the obvious interpretation is that it's errors, and yet Muslims have consistently said no, it's revealed in all these ways. He said if that were a later invention, then you would have two views. You'd have the view that it's errors, and you'd have the view that it was revealed in all these ways. But you don't. He's saying you have one view. Now, didn't you have two views?
Exactly.
Isn't that it?
You had that view that said these are mistakes.
Yeah, you do have two views.
Yeah, so Farid is ignorant of one of the views, and therefore he thinks there's only one view. Let's go back to just make sure that's what he was saying.
They were there from the start and were acknowledged. That's it. If they were not there from the start, if this was a view that was introduced later on, you'd have these two views.
Which you do.
You'd have two views.
Which you do. So
back to the camel yarn.
But you only
think about what he just said. If this were something that were invented later, you'd have two views. Okay. You do have two views. Therefore, it was something that was invented later, Farid. Thank you.
have one view.
That's a syllogism, Farid.
You only have one view, which is the Quran is revealed in multiple modes. Okay?
Oh wait, so is he saying that you'd have two views? Like one view says the Quran is only revealed one way, and another view saying no, it came in all these different ways.
He's confusing ahruf with qira'at. He's saying modes, which means ahruf.
Oh, he's mixing between.
He's mixing them.
Okay, so he's saying like, okay, on one hand you'd have one view that says there's only. I think he might be saying like you'd have one view that says there's only one reading of the Quran, and you have another view. So there's like clashing views, but because they always said there's multiple, Qurans, that's how we know that's the Orthodox view. Farid, you're gonna have to clarify that.
Yeah. So he basically he already said what the Orthodox view is, right? He explained this is the real reason why you don't say they're mistakes. So you don't say the mistakes because we've had centuries of Muslims consistently saying this one thing. Therefore, since they're not going with the obvious interpretation, namely these are mistakes, and they're going with the silly interpretation, therefore you'd have to say that is the Orthodox position. That's orthodoxy.
Oh, okay.
And then he says, after that, he says, if this explanation were the Orthodox explanation, according to him, that all the different qira'at and so on go back to Muhammad, all the variants go back to Muhammad, saying, if this were something that was invented later, if later Muslims came up with this theory, then you would expect that you have two views. You have the view that it's mistakes and the view that all of this somehow all these variants go back to Muhammad. But you don't. You've got one. That's the point. No, you actually have the two. We have records of the two views. And so he's saying if this came along later, then there'd be two views. Okay, you do have two views. You have to modify the syllogism because that'd be a fallacy. But yeah, he's saying if this were the case, you'd have two views. We do have two views, Farid. We saw them. We saw them on the screen.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you have like Muslim scholars who pick up on this and they say like, oh yeah, this group, like I think they attribute it to the Shia or something like that. And the Shia are arguing against the Sunnis and saying things like, hey, you guys say like, why do you guys have all these different versions of the Quran or whatever? Like you guys have these, because the Shia, they only believe that there's one harf. They don't believe in 7 ahruf for in terms of hadith. But they do accept like different readings. It's kind of weird how their view is, but you have arguments about that in like Muslim literature. So you definitely had, you had people who he would consider to be orthodox saying that there's mistakes, and then people who he wouldn't consider to be orthodox, like the Shia, who say that there's mistakes. So yeah, they were all people from all sides saying there's mistakes. And where's Farid's side for like the first couple generations at least, or however long it took them to get his view, that said, oh yeah, all of these are like, divine tawatur and all these other things that he says about them. Where is that view? When does that view come along?
This is wild stuff. So, I mean, this kind of shows, hey, you as a Muslim, you can just come up with a position at some point, and if you convince massive portions of the Muslim ummah that you have the correct position, then you can just ignore everything else, and then you can say that this is the only position ever. I mean, it's a parallel to what they did with the Quran, right? That you have all these different versions of the Quran, and then they popularize the 1924 edition. They just massively popularize it, and since they popularize it, they say eventually, therefore, that's the only version, and they run around saying this is the only version. And they convince the overwhelming majority of Muslims around the world that there is only this one version of the Quran. They managed to spin that to the entire world, and the world believes them. But it's the same thing. It's, hey, if you convince a ton of people that is the only position, they'll think that's the only position, and they'll roll with it. And then you say, well, how could there be other positions if so many people believe that there's only this one position? I don't know. You guys keep doing that over and over again.
Yeah, like take like the scientific miracles again. Like for so many years, that was the orthodox position for all the Dawa guys. You ask any one of them, are there scientific miracles? Oh yeah, 100%. And they go through the top, 20 or whatever, however many were saying that, and they're all saying yeah, 100%. And then years later, oh no, that's actually not correct. We were wrong about that. We had no right to misinterpret the Quran to say that there were scientific miracles when there wasn't. It's actually science is the problem. Science is the one that's always changing, not our position. It's not like, that's kind of funny. They're like science is ever changing, so we can't use that as a standard to say that there's scientific miracles. But because our position is the one that never changes, and no, actually, you guys are the ones that change all the time, and your orthodoxy is always changing. So it's.
Yeah, Farid, this is the issue. You're talking in recent decades. So within my lifetime, Farid, we have witnessed repeatedly, a handful of Muslims being able to dupe the entire ummah. You did it with the perfect preservation of the Quran, right? You just stood up one day and said, "Hey, the Quran's been perfectly preserved, right down to the letter," and the entire ummah went along with it. And then, did you know? Look, there's this new book by Maurice Bucaille, and he says scientific miracles, and then the entire ummah goes with scientific miracles. And what you're saying is, how could so many Muslims believe in something and it's completely wrong? We've seen it. We've literally seen things that Muslim da'is now acknowledge are false, and we've seen the entire ummah duped by them. Exactly. Until outsiders came along and exposed it and forced you guys to admit that the entire ummah had been deceived. Outsiders came along and pointed out the absurdities. Guess what? That's the same thing Yasser Qadhi is saying. Hey, we've got these explanations that we've been accepting for centuries. Outsiders come along and point out how stupid it is, and we're realizing that they're right. Just like with the scientific miracles, just like with the perfect preservation, this happens, Farid. So how can you sit back and say, but look, the Muslim community agreed on this? Yeah, we've seen they can agree on almost anything, no matter how ridiculously false it is. So how is that your standard of true and false in Islam? This is weird stuff. All right.
Have some other things to keep in mind. Sa'id bin Jubair, used to recite in 2 recitations. What's going on? Why is Sa'id bin Jubair reciting 2 recitations? In Ramadan, in one night, he recites the recitation of Zayd bin Thabit / Uthman bin Affan. And the other night, he's reciting the recitation of Ibn Mas'ud.
Nice. Smart.
They all got the same accent, by the way. All have the same accent, all from Quraysh.
Yeah, even though they have different chapters, and they're from the same. But look at what he just said. So you've got Zayd ibn Thabit, that's the guy Uthman assigned to compile the Quran. But Muhammad is the one who said, if you want to learn the Quran from anyone, learn it from Ibn Mas'ud. And so this guy's smart enough to say, okay, this is what my leader's telling me to do. And Muhammad has said that I have to obey, I have to mindlessly obey my leader. So great, I'm going to recite that one. But Muhammad said that if I want to learn the Quran from anyone, learn it from Ibn Masud. Okay, I'll just recite them both. I'll just keep reciting both of these different versions of the Quran. Farid, you're not helping yourself, buddy. You're not helping yourself by confusing everyone even more and pointing out the absurdity.
Especially
One of
since Ibn
the
Masud was against, he was
Yeah.
against this compilation.
compilation
Yeah.
Isn't that funny, by the way? So you have all these passages with Ibn Masud showing contempt for the version of Zayd ibn Thabit, and Farid's bringing this up as this. You see, it's revealed in all these different ways. Why wasn't that the position of the early Muslims then?
Yeah, I think it wasn't Ibn Masud who said, like, there's not a surah in the Quran that I don't know.
Except that I knew.
Yeah, and then he said, like, and there's not a verse except I don't know it's a revelation. And he also said, you know, I learned 70 chapters of the Quran while Zayd was still like
in the loins of in the loins of a pagan.
Yeah, in the loins of a pagan. Yeah, but you know, literally in the Arabic it says in the backbone, because they believe
that's funny.
That's really so while he's in the backbone of his father, as in the loins of a pagan, let's say. Yeah, I learned 70 chapters. So he's acting like they all just kind of like accepted this. No, they didn't. They were he said, why should I take his Quran? Why should I abandon mine for his? You know, like they weren't. So he's just not giving them the full story.
No, he's not, and he can't, and he won't, and he never will until we make him. Just like with everything else in doubt. Just like, and Muslims who are watching, because we know there are Muslims watching. We know there are Farid fans watching. Guys, like what does it take? What does it take that your dawah guys will keep giving you an explanation and pretending that this accounts for the evidence when they don't give you the evidence? And non-Muslims have to come in and say, here's what the evidence is, the real evidence is from your sources, and this is why your explanations don't fit. Why do you have to hear the truth from us? Why does Sheikh Yasser Qadhi have to say, yeah, all the Muslim scholars will just refuse to cross the line, and we'll all say, oh yes, this accounts for it, and it's the non-Muslims who have to come in and quote our sources to us and show us that doesn't work? And he says, and we know they're right. Why? Why does truth, if you have the religion of truth, why does truth always have to come from outside? Why? Why is it you guys believe lies until non-Muslims come along and show you the truth? Why is that? I really want to know. I really want to know how you take your religion as the truth when the only truth that it ever has comes from outside. Outsiders coming along saying, let's explain the truth to you. And then you flipping out for years until you finally agree.
Of the Ummah, or of the Imams of the Tabi'een. Why is he reciting two recitations if there's only one recitation? Okay? And then you have Ibn Sirin. And these are, by the way, like authentic attributions to these ulama. And you'll find the stuff like in Masahif Ibn Abi Dawood and I think Kitab al-Dani, like one of al-Dani's books, Jami' al-Bayan, if I recall correctly. You find stuff like this in those works, in these early works.
There's still a few minutes left. I don't know if he's going anywhere else.
But yeah, you find Ibn Sirin saying, I wish I could memorize multiple recitations.
Well, if they're so similar, it shouldn't be terribly difficult, right? If it's just dialectical differences.
Because it was difficult for him.
I don't know if he has another point after this one, but I don't get how this
helps
answers the question. Like,
no.
I mean, you know, like if this guy tells his brothers who are freaking out about the differences that actually, hey guys, all the companions had different
all the way back.
Yeah. It was an open secret from the beginning. I don't know why you just caught up to it now.
It's just going to confirm that like, you know, they're like
they're lying.
Yeah, it's going to confirm that they should have been freaking out from a long time ago.
Yeah. So guys, you're freaking out about all the different Qurans. They're like car seats. They go way back. They go way back. All these differences go way back. So yeah, you thought you're freaking out now. Wait till I tell you that even the early Muslims were reciting the Quran in these different ways, and that they were almost ready to go to war over all these differences, and they were ready to fight over these differences. And that's why Uthman had to burn all these differences. And then Muslims who didn't want to go along with Uthman's version, they flipped out and they said, hide your Qurans. Over what? Extremely minor differences that don't matter, Farid? Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. All right, I think we've got Farid's points there. I don't know if he's going anywhere else with this, but Farid has given us his perspective on things. And what set all of that up is someone asking, hey, why can't we just say that these variants in the different qira'at were just scribal errors at some point? They're just little mistakes.
Right.
And then the guy explained, he's saying, because Muslims are freaking out about this. They're flipping out when they find out that there are different Qurans. Why are they flipping out when they find out they're different Qurans? Because Dawah guys spent decades lying to them, telling them there's only one Quran.
Exactly.
They're finding out that it's false. And that guys, that should, for anyone else in the world, that should be a light switch moment. Like, oh, wait a minute, these guys told me all these years. Perfect preservation right down to the letter, not one letter of difference between any two Qurans anywhere in all of history. That either means, one, they were ignorant. My Dawah guys are ignorant. And the entire Dawah community was ignorant because the entire Dawah community was telling me the same thing. So either the entire Dawah community is ignorant, in which case, why should I believe them? Or the Dawah community knew and they were lying to me. Ignorant or deceptive? I forgot the blues. Ignorant or deceptive. It's one or the other. If that's the case, if these guys are ignorant, why am I going to listen to them? If they're deceptive, why am I going to listen to them? Either way, why should I be listening to them? Somehow in Islam, you are so thoroughly conditioned that you could catch these guys lying to you 10,000 times, and you'd instantly, when you catch them on the 10,001st lie, you instantly go right back to them. Please, sir, give me another lie. This is wild stuff. This is wild stuff. All right, I guess we'll take these last couple of super chats, and then we will share our final thoughts and summaries on this whole epic dumpster fire that is Dawah. Hey, we had Eli here. Hey, Eli Shamoon. Love and miss you, David. Hey, Eli, I don't know what conferences you're going to. I'm going to a conference in Texas next month, and then in November we got EPS. In case you're going to any of that, I'll be seeing you there. Muslims are always like, the Talmud or the Bible says XYZ. The problem is that the Quran is supposed to be the literal word of God versus compilation of text. Yeah, that is an ongoing problem, that they have their way of reading the Quran and then they think everyone else reads every other book like that. And it doesn't compute. My friend converted to Islam. Is it me or people converted to Islam when they have a lot of hate in their heart? Don't worry, guys. I'll bring him back to Christ. Yeah, as far as people converting to Islam, yeah, you can, and you've seen this. You've seen people in the Free Palestine protest who they spend months protesting and stuff, and then it comes out, and I've converted to Islam. And there it seems like, yeah, I'm enraged at this thing, and Islam is the religion that says be enraged about this thing, and therefore I'm going with Islam. You have that. But as far as lots of people converting, lots of people, it seems, just are converting for attention. And Chris Rock talked about this in his last stand-up. He's saying that the world people have become addicted to attention. You need attention, you crave it, and social media has wired people to crave attention. And he says there are a few basic ways to get attention, to make your attention skyrocket. And one of those ways was to be a victim. And for lots of people, it's just, oh, if I convert to Islam, one, I'm going to get a lot of attention from Muslims instantly. So if I just say, hey, after reading the Quran, I've concluded that it's true. All of a sudden, you're going to get tons of attention, both positive and negative, but simultaneously, you've made yourself into a victim. So you have just by converting to Islam, you get 2 instant keys to a ton of attention. And so when you combine that with people being addicted to attention, yeah, you're going to see people converting to Islam. Let's see. Skyscraper Philosopher says, seen Andrew Wilson rage quit debate. Wait, Andrew Wilson rage quit?
No, he didn't. So basically, he was trying to only debate child marriage in Islam, and the Muslim Lantern was like, "No, I'm not having that. It's going to be Christianity versus Islam on child marriage." And he didn't want this Wilson guy, or Andrew Wilson didn't want to. He didn't want to. He said, "I didn't agree to that." He said, "Like we agreed to two debates: child
Right.
marriage in Islam and the Trinity in Christianity." And he said, "You know, in the debate on Trinity and Christianity." I'm not going to be bringing up Islam at all. I'm just going to be talking about Christianity. So there's no reason for me to bring up Islam in that debate. So in this debate, I don't want to have to defend, Christianity on this. I'm just talking about in Islam, and they couldn't agree on this, and it just turned into a dumpster fire. And so I think he did end up leaving, but it wasn't like he got just because he rage quit. Like they didn't agree on the terms of the debate.
Yeah, that happened. And that's an ongoing thing. That's very frequent that Muslims at the last second or right when it's starting or right before it starts will want to change something. They'll want to change who the debater is. They'll want to change the topic, change the rules or something like this. And I have to say, I would agree with them on that. If they said, hey, here's the topic we've agreed to debate, and you get on there and they say, actually, we're going to change it to this. There are situations where even if I love the change, even if I think it's a good change, I'll be like, no, not happening.
That's not what we agreed to.
Yeah, matter of fact, that happened recently. That happened, I think it was last year. But what's that Harvard guy's name? Javad something.
Yeah.
Hashim, yeah.
Yeah. So he sent me like this 11 part series of tweets telling me I'm wrong about Aisha and that she wasn't 9. And he gives all these tweets. And then at the end of all the tweets, he says, and do you agree to debate me on this? And I said instantly, sure. And then all of his fans, they didn't see me say, sure, let's set it up. And all his fans started going, why is David running? Like instantly, as soon as he put him out, they instantly, and I in other words, I responded instantly, but instantly why is David running? Why is David running from Javad? Like I literally agreed instantly. So then he says, hey, let's arrange it in private messages or something like that. So then we go over to the private messages and he says, okay, so the topic we will debate is treatment of women in the Bible and the Quran.
Wow.
And notice what was the issue that he challenged me on? Aisha.
The age of Aisha.
Yeah. And then it becomes treatment of women in the Bible and the Quran. Well, the issue of Aisha is in the Hadith, right? And he tries to wipe that out, and so instantly I go, not interested. You either debate the topic you originally challenged me on, or I'm not debating you on anything else. And then he starts running. He's scared of me. He's running. It's like you did a bait and switch, dude. You said, here, let's debate this. I agreed, and then you change it. Not interested. So afterwards, I made it clear because his fans would come, and I was like, look, I don't care if he offered me my dream debate on some topic that I love. I'm not going near that until he does the topic he originally challenged me on. I'm not going for the bait and switch. So I agree that I can see that entirely. I mean, it's obviously a judgment call. A person can say, okay, they want to change it. Fine. That's up to you. But yeah, you do want it in the heads of Muslims that they can't just pull these stunts every time. And so, but if Muslim Lantern wants to debate that particular topic, Christianity and Islam, when it comes to child marriage, that sounds like something Inspiring Philosophy would be keen to do, because I'm guessing Muslim Lantern is just like copying Daniel Hakikachu at this point. And
exactly.
He'll get eaten alive on that. Let's see. Solaria says, well, of course, Farid has to give these sorts of explanations. To not lean on the one bastion of potentially plausible denial would be to leave Islam. And that is the issue. Once you see if you ever get to the point where you're just like, I see the problem. I see all these textual variants and so on. I see the implications. It's like you're going to have to leave Islam if you're able to spot all these problems and no real solutions. Solari says, yeah, I was quite sloppy with my pronunciation and said it that way too. The precise way you say it doesn't matter. Just remember the meaning. Yeah.
Oh, the different Qurans.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And here, I know it's not exactly something you usually talk about, but there's a person called Plato in the chat arguing the Father and the Spirit are synonymous. Have easy proof this is not the case to hand. Well, the Father
sends the Spirit.
The Father sends the Spirit, and Jesus goes to the Father to together send the Spirit. So, yeah, doesn't make sense that these would be the same thing. And finally here, Muslims are a little slow, I see. Well, not everyone, but definitely anyone who's following Farid is going to be a bit slow.
Yeah, even he told his chat off. I mean, even he told them off. He called them punks.
Yeah, he's like, you bunch of punks. There's only two of you. I've been talking, and only two of you even know what the question is. This shows how dumb you are. And there's the added problem that all his followers have been following him for years. They couldn't even explain how to answer the question of why you wouldn't say the Kirat are just mistakes. All right, guys. What are the final thoughts and takeaways to this point? Because we know Farid is going to say more things in the future. He's going to say more things in the future. But what do you guys think?
I'll use the words of Yasir Qadi. The emperor has no clothes. And that's it. Islam has no clothes when it comes to qira'at and ahruf. And everybody else is acting as if he has clothes on. And everybody knows there are none.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's actually amazing because that is such a perfect description, right? So the story of the story in the emperor's new clothes, in case anyone is not familiar with it, these guys show up to town and they're supposedly the greatest clothing designers there are, and so the emperor wants their latest garment, and they tell everyone that the garments are invisible to anyone who's stupid. If you're stupid, they're invisible. So then they don't make anything. They don't make anything for the emperor, and no one's willing to call it out. No one's willing to say, hey, he's got no clothes on, because everyone thinks, oh, if I don't see it, then I'm stupid. I'm stupid. And there's finally some kid who says, hey, he's got no clothes on. Then everyone realizes, oh, wow, he is naked. They finally realize I'm not stupid. He's actually wearing no clothes. But that's what it's like. It's they
gaslighting.
Yeah, you're a bad Muslim unless you agree with us here. Unless you go with this completely ridiculous explanation, you're not a good Muslim. The only way you can be a good Muslim is to pretend that Islam's just wrapped in these awesome clothes. And that's what Yasir Qadi says. That's Yasir Qadi's analogy. It's like, that's the Muslim community. We're all running around saying, oh, look at this beautiful garment. Yes, look at this beautiful clothing here. And finally, a non-Muslim scholar comes along and goes, it's completely naked. There's nothing there. And then he's saying, and we know they're right. Isn't that amazing? And we know they're right. We know they're right because they're quoting our sources. So that's, and you've got Farid still running around saying, what lovely garments. Does everyone see these lovely garments that the emperor is wearing? And we're once again sitting here going, come on, seriously.
Yeah. So Muslims are going to keep asking questions about this, and they're going to keep being freaked out about this. And so the Muslims, I think you were right, David, that the Muslims who, hear what you have to say, and then they go over to like Farid, see like, okay, can you answer this? Like, can we actually say that? Can we say these are mistakes? That's what makes most sense to me. And so they're going to keep hearing this. They're going to be dissatisfied by Farid's answers, the same things he's been saying over the years, and all the other Muslim dawah guys. And at the end of the day, to all those Muslims listening, to all the ones who are interested in searching out the truth of these matters, look, it's clear that there are holes in the standard narrative. The standard narrative does have holes. And you guys need to realize that there's no patching it up. There's too many holes. You can't patch it up. The boat is going to sink. And so, yeah, we encourage you guys to keep questioning, to keep looking into things. And eventually you're going to see that Islam is false. And once you realize that, it's going to open up a whole, Pandora's box. You're going to say, if they lied to me about the Quran, what else did they lie to me about? Well, we can tell you they lied to you about Jesus. They told you he's not the Son of God. They told you that he wasn't crucified. They told you he didn't die for your sins. They didn't rise from the dead. So again, keep studying, keep looking into these things, and pray about the truth of these. And you're on your pursuit to the truth. We pray, and we, if you're sincere, you're going to end up believing that Jesus is Lord. He did die on the cross for your sins, and he rose from the dead 3 days later, defeating death. And that's our prayer for all of the non-Christians that are watching. So we hope that for them as well. But specifically for the Muslims, you guys keep going back to Farid. You're not going to get your answers from him. He's not going to satisfy you with answers, because Islam can't do that. They can't give you that satisfactory answers for these questions. They just lie, make things up.
And I think it would be good for Muslims to kind of take a step back at some point and think, okay, if my religion just requires me to keep saying the emperor has beautiful clothes on when the emperor is butt naked, right? The emperor is just standing there butt naked in front of everybody. If your religion just requires you, even after the little kid calls him out and says, hey, he's got no clothes on. If your religion requires you to keep saying, no, he's got beautiful clothes on. I can see with my own eyes that he doesn't, that he's completely naked, but he's got beautiful clothes on. He's got beautiful clothes on. Farid thinks I'm not a good Muslim unless I keep saying he's got beautiful clothes on. If your religion requires you to do that, then the next question is, why is your religion requiring you to say that? And you think, oh, it's because God has revealed this and God is telling me to keep saying that the emperor has beautiful clothes on. God requires me. If I want to be obedient. So the question is, why do you think that that comes from God? Why do you think that comes from God? And I'm asking you a serious question. Why do you think this religion comes from God at this point? When we see all these problems, and then your Dawah guys compel you to accept all these ridiculous explanations, and we're sitting here thinking, why? Why do you think this is actually from God? I understood why you thought it was from God 10 years ago when it was all perfect preservation of the Quran and scientific miracles and so on. That's all been exposed and debunked, even according to your Dawah guys now. So I don't even know what your reasons are for believing in Muhammad anymore. I can't understand it. Every single argument you've used has been completely debunked, and the arguments that were used were by these same guys who keep lying to you. And so when I ask a Muslim, hey, why do you believe? It always comes back to lies. And so why are you accepting all the lies? Oh, because I believe I have to accept the lies because my religion is true. Why do you believe in the religion? Why? Because of all these lies. It's so weird. It's so insanely weird. And you just have to step back. Guys, so Muslims, that's a good question. Sit back and think, why do I believe in this stuff? And try to give answers that aren't based on some lies that the same liars told you. Show me. I would love to hear it. I'm completely serious. I would love to hear at this point in history, now that the scientific miracle has been exposed, now that all this stuff has been exposed, why in the name of common sense do you still think this is from God? I don't know. I have no idea, but I'd love for you to tell me. But that's something you should be thinking about right now. What reasons do you have for thinking that Islam is true? What reasons that aren't based on complete deception? Leave that to you. All right. Thanks to Jai and DOC for joining me and breaking a bunch of this stuff down for viewers. And they do a lot of work responding to new videos over on their channel. So definitely want to subscribe. Link is in the description box. And I'll be live again with AP in, I think, a little over an hour, 8 p.m. Let's see. He sent me the topic. Oh, he wants to talk about Putin kissing a Quran.
Oh.
Putin kissing a Quran. So apparently Putin kissed the Quran. And so AP is going to want to go through some of the verses in the Quran that Putin was kissing and see if that lines up with our good friend. So we'll be discussing that. And then tomorrow, people have been pointing out some of the dumb stuff Mohammed Hijab has been saying recently. Tomorrow evening back here on my channel, we'll be going through some of the Mohammed Hijab's comments from his recent discussion with Sneeko, specifically him saying that the Jesus of the Bible is a coward. Guys, you have no idea how much of an apostate that dude just became with the argument that he used, because it's going to apply not just to the Jesus of the Bible. In fact, it's the reverse for the Jesus of the Bible, but it does apply to the Jesus of Islam. His argument saying that Jesus is a coward actually doesn't apply to the Jesus of the Bible, does apply to the Jesus of Islam. More importantly, applies to the Muhammad of Islam. And no way out of it because he already laid down what his argument was. That'll be tomorrow. Catch y'all tonight in the bar.
God bless.